This episode is brought to you by the wonderful folks over on our Patreon. If you're enjoying Man-Eaters and you want to help me keep telling these wild, wacky, and often horrific stories, head over to our Patreon. For the cost of a whole lot of matchsticks, you'll get exclusive bonus content, early access to episodes, and hey, maybe even a sneaky photo of my nipples. Nope, no, I can't do that. I just read their terms of service and that is clearly against it. That's just straight up pornography. Maybe we'll start a Man-Eaters OnlyFans instead. An Only Man's Eaters. Bad. Ignore that. Anyway, sink your teeth in over at patreon.com/maneaters and join our pride. Your support helps me keep hunting down the juiciest stories nature has to offer. And now, on with the episode.
Toronto folk singer is dead after she was attacked by a pair of coyotes.
What is the monkey doing? Tell me what the monkey...
He ripped your face off!
We actually have a trainer in the water with one of our whales.
If I show weakness, if I retreat, I may be hurt, I may be killed.
Baby Azaria Chamberlain was taken by a dingo back in 1980.
Hello everybody, welcome back to Man-Eaters, the only true crime podcast on the entire freaking internet, where all the killers are real animals, whether it's bitings, scratchings, maulings, or clawings. We're here to talk about it. And today, oh boy, we're in for a treat. A big old episode, like a 2-hour-long episode, the best of the oceans. That's right. It's a compilation episode. I know people love those. Real talk. Right now, when this episode comes out, actually, on Saturday, I will be at my wedding, getting wedded. That's right. Your boy's getting hitched, finally settling down. I spent my 20s sowing my oats and a lot of lawsuits. Yeah, girls don't like it when you put oats in their pants, but I misunderstood what the phrase was. No, I am, officially will be, by the time you listen to this, probably will be a married man, everyone. So very exciting. Thank you to everyone who's sent through some really nice messages over the last few weeks. Very sweet of you. We're obviously very excited and really looking forward to our wedding weekend. It's going to be a really nice time. I can't wait to say I do and then instantly change my entire personality to its proper form. That's right. For the last 5 years, I've really been gaslighting and ghosting my fiance into thinking that I'm a good person, when really deep down, as all of you know from listening for the last few years, I'm really not. I'm able to keep that on the down low, but hey, she'll be legally tethered to me. I'm pretty sure I read somewhere, I think it was some kind of men's rights activist blog, that she technically is my property, which is fun because I don't have any other property, so my net worth just went up, however much a human being is worth. And she's a good one, so worth quite a lot. Anyway, I just wanted to say a big thank you to everyone who's sent those nice messages through. To let you know that is what we're doing today. So that's why I'm not sitting down and recording an entire new episode. We're going and we're looking at the best of the oceans. That's right, shark attacks, cephalopods, stingrays, and more. Basically, get ready because you're going to get wet, boys and girls. This I just realized how gross it was to say "get wet, boys and girls." It's gross because it's not inclusive. I should have said "get ready to get wet, boys, girls, intersex, and non-binary people." And I think that should cover most bases. Whatever you are, prepare to get horrifically moist by listening to almost 2 hours of the best episodes in Man-Eaters history that take place in the ocean. Ooh boy, let's get ready to dive in. The sinking of the USS Indianapolis was a devastating nautical disaster that occurred in the final days of World War II. After dropping off critical components for the atomic bomb that would level the city of Hiroshima, the ship was on its way to the Philippines when it was hit by a Japanese submarine's torpedo on July 30, 1945. The ship went down incredibly fast in just 12 minutes, and tragically, about 300 men lost their lives in the initial attack. The survivors, however, went through some very tough times dealing with dehydration, exposure, and what is widely considered to be the worst shark attack in human history while they waited to be rescued. This is one of the most heartbreaking stories of naval disasters in US history. So before we get into the shark attacks, let's talk a little bit about the ship itself. The USS Indianapolis CA-35 was a Portland-class heavy cruiser of the United States Navy, and it began its construction in the early 1930s at the New York Shipbuilding Corporation in Camden, New Jersey. The keel-laying ceremony, held on March 31st, 1930, marked the formal initiation of its construction process. Skilled workers meticulously assembled the hull, installed propulsion systems, armaments, and other equipment using modern shipbuilding techniques. After its excessive construction, the USS Indianapolis was launched into the waters of November 7, 1931, accompanied by a christening ceremony officiated by Lucy Taggart, who was the daughter of the then Secretary of the Navy, Charles Francis Adams III. This ship, by the way, when it was finished being built, had some of the largest guns on any modern warship at the time, and it was the length of roughly 2 football fields, which is massive. Following its launch, the ship underwent a phase of fitting out, during which various systems were installed and tested, ensuring optimal functionality. Finally, on November 15, 1932, the USS Indianapolis was commissioned into the U.S. Navy, officially entering active service. The USS Indianapolis then embarked on a storied journey through various theaters of operation before its tragic demise. Throughout its pre-sinking service, the cruiser fulfilled diverse roles, showcasing its versatility and significance in naval operations. During the interwar years, the USS Indianapolis participated in routine peacetime activities, including training exercises and other diplomatic missions. With the outbreak of World War II, the cruiser assumed an active role in escort duty for convoys traversing dangerous waters, safeguarding vital supply lines and troop transports. The USS Indianapolis also engaged in reconnaissance missions, scouting enemy positions and providing crucial intelligence to Allied forces. Its presence in strategic locations bolstered Allied efforts, contributing to the overall war effort. When it shifted to the Pacific Theater, the cruiser played a pivotal role in several significant campaigns, including the Battle of Yellette Gulf and the Battle of Okinawa. Its firepower and mobility proved instrumental in supporting amphibious assaults and providing fire support to ground forces. Now, its most remarkable mission is also its most famous. The USS Indianapolis successfully transported the vital components of the first ever operational atomic bomb to a naval base on the Pacific island of Tinian. In the year of 1945, this devastating weapon would be used to completely destroy the city of Hiroshima. However, on July 28th, the Indianapolis embarked on a journey from Guam to Leyte Gulf in the Philippines, where it was set to rendezvous with the battleship USS Idaho. Their purpose was to make final preparations for an impending invasion of Japan. The following day was calm, as the Indianapolis sailed at a steady speed of 17 knots through the rolling waves of the vast Pacific Ocean. As the sun set over the ship, the sailors enjoyed their leisure time, engaging in card games, reading books, and seeking guidance from the ship's priest, Father Thomas Conway. In the dead of night, disaster struck the Indianapolis as a devastating blow from a Japanese torpedo ripped apart a significant portion of the ship's bow. This impact caused a massive explosion, engulfing a tank filled with 3,500 gallons of aviation fuel in a towering inferno that reached hundreds of feet into the sky. Another torpedo from the same submarine struck even closer to midship, causing catastrophic damage. The impact ignited fuel tanks and powder magazines, triggering a series of explosions that violently tore the Indianapolis apart. Continuing at a swift pace of 17 knots, the Indianapolis encountered a significant influx of water, resulting in the ship's rapid descent in a mere 12 minutes. Out of the 1,196 crew on board, a staggering 900 managed to survive the attack and found themselves in the waters of the Pacific. Their experience, which is widely regarded as the most devastating shark attack ever recorded, was only just starting. Now, you would think that in the dead of night, being on a battleship that was struck by 2 torpedoes and destroyed, that was the worst it could get. But, like, honestly, those people, not to sound too dark, those guys had it easy. If it was me, I think I would rather just be killed in the initial explosion, or killed on the ship, because what the about 900 men went through when they went into the water was pretty terrible. It's honestly one of the worst things I've ever heard of. It's kind of similar to the story we told a few weeks ago of the football team crashing into the Andes. The rugby team crashing into the Andes. It's just such a insane story of prolonged survival against just the most harsh elements that you could possibly imagine. So, no, the people on board, and also imagine, like, put yourself in the shoes. It was just screaming. From the second that torpedo hit, it was just guys screaming. People were covered in oil and were burning, like, the skin was falling off people because they were burned by, like, battery acid that had gotten on them. It was insane. It was terrible. And it only took 12 minutes to sink this whole ship. And think of it. It's a ship that's the size of 2 football fields. And within 12 minutes from the impact, it was completely gone underwater. In less than 15 minutes, in less than a quarter of an hour, it was gone. So you just have to imagine the amount of damage that happened to the hull just from those 2 torpedoes. This ship had actually taken damage before. It had been hit by, I believe, a kamikaze submarine or a kamikaze pilot. I'm not sure. There's 2 different times. So there was kamikaze pilots, which are the most well known, and those are the ones where they would just strap a young, like a teenage Japanese boy into a plane and say, just crash your plane into the hull of a ship. And that didn't cause too much damage. But they also had these weird, like, torpedo submarine things that would be piloted. So basically, you would crawl into this tiny torpedo-shaped submarine, and you would just try to drive it towards to the ship. And also, there was no way to get out, too. Once you were in forever. You couldn't get out. So it was a suicide mission. But if you missed your target or you couldn't hit your target for whatever reason, you basically had 2 options. You could detonate your warhead in the middle of the ocean, or you could just drown. You could just basically sink to the bottom of the ocean and run out of air and die. So pretty terrible. So yeah, a kamikaze pilot, I believe, had hit the Indianapolis like a year earlier, but it basically docked and like they did repairs and was ready to go the next day. So it had sustained wartime damage before, but nothing like this. And yeah, within the span of 12 minutes, that ship was gone, and 900 men were in the water, and about 200 to 300, about 300 were dead. Sorry, about 200 were dead from the initial impact. So we've got 900 men in the water now. So as the sun rose on July 30th, the survivors floated in the water. Life rafts were in short supply. In the midst of the chaos, people bravely scoured the water for those in need, selflessly providing life-saving equipment to those who were without. In an effort to maintain a sense of structure, survivors started organizing themselves into various groups, ranging in size from small to as large as 300 people, all whilst navigating the vast open waters. Before long, they would find themselves battling against the elements, desperate for water, and facing the threat of sharks. Now, some sailors were lucky to find themselves in groups of up to 4 life rafts that could support up to a dozen men. Others made do with simple life vests or other buoyant materials that were floating around the wreck. Some people managed to find themselves on floating nets, but the unluckiest of men simply had to tread water for as long as they could. You would think at first glance the groups that had many life rafts had it the easiest, and I still think they probably did, but the rafts were constantly bumping and rubbing into each other because of the swell of the water. Eventually, the rafts would become too damaged to sink, to float, so the crews on each of the rafts began to fight. They basically their gears got grounded. They basically started to fight. Eventually, the people in charge of those groups ordered the life rafts to separate, because otherwise the integrity of all those vessels would be at risk. However, choppy waters was the least of the worries of the survivors in the water. Sharks had begun to swarm the waters surrounding the wreck. The sharks were captivated by the cacophony of explosions, the tragic sinking of the ship, and the chaotic scene of thrashing and blood in the water. Now, whilst numerous sharks inhabit the open waters of the Pacific Ocean, the oceanic whitetip stands out for its particularly aggressive nature. According to the survivors of the Indianapolis, it seems that the sharks primarily targeted victims near the surface. This has led historians to speculate that the majority of the shark-related deaths were caused by oceanic whitetip sharks. The oceanic whitetip shark is a species of requiem shark found in open waters of tropical and subtropical regions around the world. They're characterized by their distinctive white-tipped fins, particularly its prominent on its dorsal and tail fins. This shark is named for its tendency to roam the open ocean, often far from the shorelines. Oceanic whitetips have a robust body with a blunt, rounded snout and large, rounded pectoral fins. Their color varies from grayish brown to bronze on the upper side, gradually fading to a lighter shade on the belly. These sharks typically can grow between 1.5 meters to 3.5 meters, which is to say 5 to 11 feet in length, with females generally being larger than males. They are opportunistic predators. Oceanic whitetips primarily feed on a variety of prey, including small fish, squid, and occasionally seabirds or even marine animals. They are known for scavenging behavior, often trailing ships and feeding on scraps or carrion discarded by humans and other marine animals. This scavenging behavior has earned them the reputation as quote-unquote sea dogs, which is much cuter than I think those sharks actually are. If you've never seen an oceanic whitetip, when you picture shark, unless you're thinking of a great white, just classic shark, that's what it looks like. It's the most shark-looking shark you'll ever see. These sharks are highly adapted to life in the open ocean, with long, slender fins that allow for efficient cruising and maneuvering. They are capable of covering vast distances in search of food and suitable habitat. Oceanic whitetips are also known for their relatively low metabolic rate, allowing them to conserve energy in the nutrient-poor environments that they inhabit. Now, white-tip sharks have historically been involved in relatively few interactions with humans compared to other species, such as great whites or bull sharks. However, I believe that is mainly because there are less humans around in the open ocean, and if these sharks lived close to the shore, then they would be probably in that top 4 spot with bull sharks, great whites, tiger sharks, and they will probably make that 4th spot. However, these sharks have gained a reputation as potentially dangerous due to their scavenging behavior and their presence in situations where shipwrecks or aircraft crashes occur, such as the USS Indianapolis. In general, oceanic whitetips are not considered aggressive towards humans in natural settings, such as while swimming or diving in open waters. As stated before, they are primarily opportunistic feeders, often attracted to floating objects or prey items, but they typically do not view humans as prey. Most encounters with oceanic whitetips involve them investigating objects in the water out of curiosity, rather than displaying aggressive behavior. However, in situations like what happened with the USS Indianapolis, it is a much different story, which we will hear about now. So, on the first evening after the shark attack, the sharks were fixated mostly on the lifeless bodies that were adrift. However, the survivors' challenges in the water inevitably drew the attention of an increasing number of sharks. These formidable creatures possess a remarkable biological trait called a lateral line, consisting of receptors along their bodies that can detect even the slightest changes in pressure and movement from great distances. At the wreck of the USS Indianapolis, the bodies of the dead and the injured were picked off first. Survivor Corporal Edgar Harrell told the Indianapolis Star in 2014 that, quote, "That first morning we had sharks. As men got separated to be targeted, you hear a blood-curdling scream and then the body would go under, and then that life jacket popped up." During this harrowing time, sailors desperately sought to protect themselves from the relentless sharks. They would isolate themselves from those who were injured or bleeding, and when someone passed away, they would push the body away as a desperate attempt to divert the shark's attention. Countless individuals were overcome with terror, rendering them immobile and incapable of consuming the meager provisions they had managed to salvage from their vessel. One group of survivors made a fatal error by opening up a can of Spam. However, their ill-fated decision quickly attracted a horde of sharks due to the irresistible scent of the meat. I wouldn't call Spam an irresistible scent, but to each his own. The men decided to eliminate any meat rations to avoid another swarming incident. Another survivor named Harold Bray said, "I looked down, and they were just swimming around us. Their tails would hit me every once in a while. There really wasn't anywhere to go. We just had to deal with them. The sharks seemed to go after the people that had big cuts on them, were naked, or just in their skivvies. We lost a lot of good men in those first few days." According to reports, the first living man attacked by a shark was Corvell Smith. A shark rocketed up from below and locked onto Smith's arm, dragging him 10 feet below the surface. Refusing to let the shark win, Smith repeatedly punched it in the nose. The shark refused to let go, shaking its head left and right, attempting to saw off Smith's arm. Eventually, Smith dug his fingers into the shark's eyeballs, forcing it to let go. Unfortunately for Smith, his battle for survival was not over. He came out of this encounter with a completely shredded hand, mangled beyond recognition. Smith swam back to his group, but the other men, knowing how sensitive a shark's nose is to the scent of fresh blood, banished him, threatening to kill him themselves if he didn't swim away. When he tried to stay with the group, they beat him, kicked him, and clubbed him. But since Smith had so much adrenaline pumping through his body from this shark attack, he was able to force his way through the protesting men and made his way to the center of the group. That was when another sailor pulled out his knife and tried to murder Smith. Understanding that his only chance to avoid being stabbed to death was to leave the group, Smith swam away and very quickly succumbed to his injuries and drowned. In another floating group of survivors, another sailor named Harpo Elias reported that he heard a sound unlike anything he'd heard in the war up to this point. That sound was the screams of a man being eaten alive by at least 3 different sharks. Of course, there are stories of bravery and courage in this story. Some men swam around their groups, encouraging weaker individuals to not give in, and they would often lend their life jackets to the weaker swimmers. On the inverse, however, there was also a lot of thievery and murder to go on. In groups where rations of food were slim, some sailors would steal and hoard food, which would lead to fights and often murders. Overnight, the sharks continued to feed. One sailor woke up to find his friend had passed away throughout the night, and a shark had eaten away all the flesh on one of his legs. All of this happened while he slept mere meters away. So the sharks feasted for days, while the men remained stranded without any hope of rescue. According to intercepted Navy intelligence, a message from the Japanese submarine that attacked the Indianapolis did mention sinking an American battleship along the Indianapolis's route. However, this message was dismissed as a potential ploy to lure American rescue boats into an ambush. The Japanese Navy often exaggerated claims of sunken ships in the hope that the US would send rescue ships which would then in turn also be sunk. Now, the US Navy had realized that the US Indianapolis had not docked when it was meant to, but this discovery was made and its name was simply just taken off the board. In wartime, ships were often delayed, and so it meant that until a ship was at least a week late, it wouldn't be reported as missing. So as you can imagine, the men that are in the water realize that rescue is very unlikely at this point. So they just have to sit there floating in the water, watching their friends get eaten by sharks and slowly starving to death. Meanwhile, the survivors of the Indianapolis discovered that their chances were highest for survival when they stayed together as a group, with the highest rate of survivability in the center of the group. The individuals who found themselves on the fringes of society, or even worse, isolated, were particularly vulnerable to exploitation by opportunistic sharks. As time went on, numerous survivors tragically fell victim to the scorching heat and relentless thirst. Some even experienced vivid hallucinations, driving them to consume the surrounding seawater, unaware of the fatal consequences of salt poisoning. Those who indulged in this curiosity would descend into madness, experiencing uncontrolled symptoms like foaming at the mouth and the swelling of their tongue or lips. These people frequently posed a significant danger to the survivors, dragging their comrades underwater as they perished, much like the sharks lurking below. Many of these men were murdered by their fellow sailors to preserve the safety of the entire group. Now, one man, who was actually the leader of one of the groups of floating survivors, succumbed to delirium after only 2 days. He would periodically shout, "I need to get to the engine room!" In his mind, the ship hadn't sunk but was stalled in the Pacific waters. Now, this man's breakdown was at least understandable. Of all the groups, his was dying at the fastest rate. Half of the 140 men that he had started with were on rafts, but the rest were on floater nets. By the second day, most of the men on the nets were sinking and drowning. In addition to the drowning, the rough waves, and the heat beaming down from the sun, the survivors were also forced to periodically hear the screams of their friends, as one of them was attacked by a shark and dragged underwater, never to be seen again. Unbelievably, this group didn't have it the worst. The unfortunate group that was the worst off was the one led by Corporal Edgar Harold. His group, numbering 80 men to start with, swam the entire ordeal. They had no rafts, no vests, or no nets. By the end of the second day, 40 of the men had already died of exhaustion and drowning. But the ocean currents refused to carry the bodies away, meaning that the survivors of this group had to swim next to their dead and bloated bodies of their friends the entire time. These bodies, of course, attracted even more sharks. Now, sharks, of course, they were the most horrific way to go, but they were not the deadliest thing that the sailors were up against. That was dehydration. Dehydration was the real problem here. Some men were so thirsty that they drank seawater, which is 100% fatal. On the third day, the men's life jackets, which were designed to float for at most 2 days, began to slowly deflate. Now, this was bad news for everyone, but especially for that group that was attacked by a frenzy of sharks. All the nearby men could do was cover up their ears until the screams stopped. Now, I should mention that these 900 men in the water, they're not all together. Because the ship was still moving as it was sinking, it was going at like 17 knots, and people were getting off the ship at different intervals. Different groups were like up to like a mile away from each other. So it was basically this like mile-long row of chum in the water, essentially. Now, another thing I'm going to touch on, but I won't go into too much detail, and this is a really weird part of the story, is, and I don't know how to say this, a lot of the sailors suffered from what I can only kind of describe as excessive horniness. I don't know why. And I can't imagine being like this in such a shitty situation. So many of these men got so horny in the water, they were like threatening at knife point other soldiers to like give them sexual services, to like jerk them off, and to like, you know, maybe it was just cuddling, I don't know, but they were very horny. And that's part of the story that's kind of like not talked about a lot. And I think that maybe that's a bit of survivor's guilt there as well. These, like, people were like, this sucks to say, people were like raped at knife point in lifeboats. And those people who did the raping potentially survived as well. So that's just a hard thing to come back from, I think, emotionally, being raped at sea, but also being so delirious that you do that. Insane. And at the same time that some of these men were demanding sexual favors from each other, there were other groups attacking each other with knives and sharp objects, which spilled more blood into the water and attracted even more sharks. So the smallest sharks, they were actually the most aggressive ones that attacked sailors, that they drag them underwater and they would eat the sailors bite by bite. Now, the larger sharks, measuring up to 20 feet in length, they were less aggressive, but they were still terrifying. They would slowly approach a group and inspect them, and then they would instantly devour a victim before they even had time to react. So we're now 64 hours in. Imagine spending 64 hours in the ocean. And and pretty much all the life vests and life rafts at this point had lost their buoyancy. Now, many men had exposed wounds on their fingers and toes where small fish had eaten away the tender flesh. One survivor said he could recognize when a shark attack was about to happen because he would see swarms of small, colorful fish approach a man before a shark would torpedo in and kill the sailor. The fish would then return to eat whatever flesh was left of the dead man. Now, fish and sharks were not the only predators out there. Cannibalism also reared its ugly head. We've talked about cannibalism a lot in the last couple months on this show, and, you know, similar to, you know, the Andes disaster with the plane and the rugby team, similar to the Donner Party, this was a survival situation, and cannibalism became prevalent. However, unlike in the Andes, cannibalism here really only took 3 days to set in. I imagine because you're treading water, you need more energy, and that's why they became so desperate so quickly. But yeah, there are reports of one man slitting the throat of another survivor just to drink his blood, which is pretty horrific. And another survivor reported seeing a man kill another and eat that survivor while aboard a life raft. Just a reminder, this is all after 3 days. By the 4th day in the water, a stroke of luck came when a Navy plane flying overhead spotted the survivors of the Indianapolis and immediately called for assistance. Before he did this, though, the pilot apparently thought that it was a Japanese crew that were just stuck in the water, and he was ready to just start strafing and killing any survivors, but he luckily identified them as Americans, and he basically called in for assistance. So shortly after that, a seaplane arrived. It was piloted by Lieutenant Adrian Marks, and it swiftly arrived at the location and deployed rafts and essential survival provisions. Witnessing the devastation of the area and the harrowing scene of men under shark attack, Marks defied orders and bravely descended into the treacherous waters. With unwavering determination, he skillfully maneuvered his plane to assist the injured and those left behind who were in grave danger. In the dead of night, the USS Doyle made its way to the scene and provided crucial assistance in rescuing the remaining survivors of the treacherous waters. Out of the original 1,196 crew members of the Indianapolis, only 317 survived. There have been varying estimates on the number of fatalities caused by shark attacks, ranging from a few dozen to nearly 150. It's difficult to say for certain how many people died from that versus how many died from drowning. Regardless, the experience of the Indianapolis survivors stands as the most devastating maritime tragedy in the history of the United States Navy. Now, after all this happened, the war ended like a week and a half after this. Which, by the way, the day that so we've all watched Oppenheimer by now, surely. So this ship took the materials to this place in the Philippines a day after the Trinity test was successful. There was no break. Oppie made the Trinity test happen, and then the ship was taking fucking enriched plutonium or whatever, uranium, out to Thailand or wherever it was, to get this bomb going. So, yeah, and then by the time this ship sunk, the Hiroshima was already bombed, and when they announced the end of the war, that was also the same day that they announced that the ship had sunk, which kind of put a bit of a dampener on the mood, I guess, because everyone who died kind of died in vain. They weren't at war. There was nothing to fight for anymore when this happened, so it was sad. So they did think that somebody needed to pay the price for this. They needed a head. They needed someone to blame, and that blame was ultimately pointed at Captain Charles McVeigh, who was the commanding officer of the USS Indianapolis. Now, just a few months after he was rescued from the waters, Charles McVeigh was facing a court-martial. He was charged with hazarding the ship by failing to zigzag to evade enemy submarines. Now, this is bullshit. This is a bogus charge. He was also court-martialed for not sounding the evacuation alarm fast enough to let more people off the ship. But remember, it only took 12 minutes to sink. And as for the zigzagging thing, yeah, when you're in treacherous waters, ships are ordered to zigzag to avoid patrols and torpedoes and all that. However, he was informed multiple times that the waters he was going through were safe, and was told not to zigzag so that he could get there faster. So yeah, he was court-martialed However, many believe these charges to be unjust, which they were. McVeigh was eventually exonerated posthumously in 2001. Now, if you've ever watched the movie Jaws, this might sound familiar to you. That's because the character of Captain Quinn, the salty guy who puts his nails on the chalkboard, he is based off a survivor of the Indianapolis, and his big monologue is actually based on this whole story. I'm going to read it for you now in my best Captain Quinn voice. How do I do it? Here we go. Japanese submarine slammed two port. I can't do it. Hold on. Let me get into character. The Japanese submarine slammed two torpedoes in her side, Chief. We was coming back from the island of Tinian to Leyte. We just delivered the bomb, the Hiroshima bomb. 1,100 men went into the water. Vessel went down in 12 minutes. Didn't see the first shark for about half an hour. Tiger, 13-footer. You know how you know that in the water, Chief? You can tell by looking from the dorsal to the tail. What we didn't know was that our bomb mission was so secret, no distress signal had been sent out. They didn't even list us overdue for a week. Very first light, Chief, sharks come cruising by, so we formed ourselves into tight groups. The voice has changed heaps now. It's like the sea captain from The Simpsons. It was sort of like you see in the calendars, the infantry squares in the old calendars, like the Battle of Waterloo. And the idea was the shark come to the nearest man. That man, he starts pounding and hollering, and sometimes that shark, he go away. But sometimes he wouldn't go away. Sometimes that shark looks right at you, right into your eyes. And the thing about a shark is he's got lifeless eyes, black eyes, like a doll's eyes. When he comes at you, he doesn't even seem to be living till he bites you, and those black eyes roll over white, and then, you hear that terrible high-pitched screaming. The ocean turns red, and despite your pounding and your hollering, these sharks come in and they rip you to pieces. By the end of that first dawn, lost 100 men. I don't know how many sharks were there, maybe 1,000. I do know how many men they averaged in 6 an hour. Thursday morning, Chief, I bumped into a friend of mine, Herbie Robinson from Cleveland, baseball player, Boston's mate. I thought he was asleep, reached over to wake him up. He bobbed up and down in the water. He was like a kind of top, upended. Well, he'd be bitten in half below the waist. At noon on the 5th day, a Lockheed Ventura swung in low, and he spotted us. A young pilot, lot younger than Mr. Hooper here. Anyway, he spotted us, and a few hours later, a big old fat PBY come down and started to pick us up. That was the time I was most frightened, waiting for my turn. I'll never put on a life jacket again. So, and here's the best bit. So, 1,100 men went into the water. 316 men come out. The sharks took the rest. The June 29th, 1945. Anyway, we delivered the bomb. I feel like the impression got better towards the end. That was it. That was the thing from Jaws, which was based on this story. Yeah, it's an absolutely insane story. I cannot believe it happened. I can't believe anyone survived. It's honestly a miracle that they were rescued at all, because no one was looking for them. It was just a miracle that the sea was, still enough, that there were enough heads bobbing in the water that they could see him. But by all measures, no one should have come out of that. But 316 men did. As of a few years ago, only 5 men who were on that ship are still alive, and many of them are still super traumatized. They can't even take a bath. They're not going to the beach anytime soon, I'll tell you that. Yeah. And a lot of them, they do meet up occasionally. They have like little reunions. In fact, they found the wreck and they brought it up and they showed the survivors, which is like, I don't think if I was the survivor, I'd want to see that ship ever again. But they did do that. So yeah, that's the story, gang. Wild. Very scary. All right, let's take a break and we'll be back with the rest of our episode. While descriptions have varied over time, common accounts portray the Kraken as a gargantuan creature with tentacles that could span the length of a ship and more. These tentacles were said to be adorned with massive suction cups, each endowed with an unparalleled gripping force capable of ensnaring even the sturdiest of vessels. The Kraken's limbs were often depicted as rising from the depths, coiling around ships and dragging them beneath the waves in a watery embrace of doom. Legends of the Kraken's ability to generate powerful maelstroms added to its mystique. Sailors spoke of whirlpools emerging in the wake of the Kraken's movements, capable of consuming everything in their path. These vortexes symbolize the unfathomable power of the sea and the danger it posed to those who dared to challenge it. The Kraken, embodying both the unknown depths and the tumultuous surface of the ocean, came to epitomize the hazards and the wonders of maritime exploration. Now, while the legend of the Kraken has captivated the human imagination for centuries, it is important to note that historical accounts of ships being attacked by the Kraken are scarce and often blend myth with reality. Many of the stories that have circulated over time are likely exaggerations or embellishments, fueled by seafarers' tales and the rich maritime folklore of various cultures. Here are a couple examples that have been passed down through history. The 18th century account by Bishop Eric Pontoppidan. Bishop Eric Pontoppidan, a Danish-Norwegian scholar, included a detailed account of the Kraken in his work The Natural History of Norway, published in 1755. The bishop cited reports from Norwegian sailors who claimed to have witnessed encounters with the Kraken. According to these accounts, the Kraken would rise from the depths, creating a whirlpool that drew in ships and sailors. The bishop's account, whilst not first-hand, contributed to the Kraken's mythos and helped solidify its place in maritime folklore. The Swedish warship the Princess. An account from the 18th century tells of a Swedish warship named the Princess that allegedly encountered a sea monster near the coast of Norway in 1752. The crew reported seeing a creature with a long neck and a massive body. They described its appearance as similar to a gigantic octopus or squid. The ship's captain ordered the crew to fire cannons at the creature, but it reportedly vanished beneath the waves before any significant damage could be done. This account, however, is fraught with inconsistencies and could have been influenced by the prevailing Kraken legend of the time. The account of Pierre Denis de Montfort. In the early 19th century, French naturalist Pierre Denis de Montfort published an account in his, here we go, Histoire naturelle générale et peculiare des cephalopodes octabophorbios in 1801. I'm going to translate that later in the story, don't worry. In which he described a sea monster with 8 arms that sailors called a poupe colossal or colossal octopus. Montfort's account, whilst not exclusively tied to the Kraken legend, contributed to the maritime mythology surrounding large sea creatures. It is important to approach these historical accounts with skepticism, as they were often influenced by cultural beliefs, misunderstandings of natural phenomena, and the tendency of stories to evolve over time. While these anecdotes provide a glimpse into how the Kraken myth was woven into the maritime narratives, they should be viewed through a lens of historical context. Now, as the Kraken myth spread, it transcended its original Nordic roots and found its way into the narratives of cultures around the world. In the 18th and 19th centuries, European explorers encountered new lands and new people, often bringing with them tales of the Kraken. These stories blended with existing folklore, creating a tapestry of global maritime mythology intertwined with fact and fiction, reality and imagination. The Kraken's captivating image has also found a home in literature and art. Herman Melville's iconic Moby Dick introduced readers to a colossal squid that bore striking resemblances to the Kraken. Melville's imaginative rendering of the monstrous cephalopod further solidified the Kraken's place in popular culture, immortalizing it as a symbol of the deep's mystery and danger. Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, published in 1870, marked another pivotal moment in the Kraken's journey throughout literature. Verne's depiction of a fierce battle between Captain Nemo's ship, the Nautilus, and a colossal squid captured the tension between human ingenuity and the alien wonders lurking below the surface. This portrayal combined scientific fascination with the Kraken's aura of enigma, echoing humanity's ceaseless quest to uncover the secrets of the ocean's depths. The Kraken's influence extends beyond literature and into visual arts, where depictions of the creature adorned maps, paintings, and other forms of visual representation. These artistic renditions serve not only as embellishments, but also as reflections on the cultural psyche, capturing humanity's simultaneous awe and trepidation towards the unknown. Throughout history, the Kraken has been a popular subject in visual arts, appearing in various forms of artistic expression, ranging from illustrations to paintings to modern digital art. These depictions often capture the awe, fear, and the mystery associated with the mythical sea creature. Here are a few examples of famous artworks that depict the Kraken. In the 1880s, The Kraken by John Tenniel was painted. John Tenniel, best known for his illustrations in Lewis Carroll's Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, created a dramatic depiction of the Kraken. In this artwork, the Kraken emerges from the depths, its massive tentacles coiling around a ship as sailors attempt to fend off the creature. The illustration captures the sense of impending doom and the struggle of humanity against the forces of the deep sea. In 1801, Pierre Denis de Montfort, who we talked about earlier, a French naturalist, included an illustration of a Kraken attacking a sailing ship in his book, and I read the really long name before. The English translation is General and Peculiar Natural History of Octabfubiferous cephalopods. The artwork shows a monstrous creature with 8 long arms wrapping around a ship's hull. Montfort's depiction contributed to the maritime lore surrounding large sea creatures. This was entitled Kraken Attacking a Sailing Ship, and if you go on the Instagram where I post the notifications of all the new episodes, that is the painting I'm talking about, which is the most recent post that you'll be seeing on the Instagram. The next painting we're going to talk about is simply titled The Kraken by Gustave Doré, which was painted in the 1870s. Gustave Doré, a renowned French artist, created an evocative engraving of the Kraken as part of his illustrations for Alfred Tennyson's The Idylls of the King. The artwork depicts the Kraken's massive form rising from the depths of the ocean with its tentacles extended upwards. Doré's mastery of light and shadows adds to the dramatic effect, emphasizing the creature's mythological imposing presence. Hakusei, The Kraken by Hakusei Katsushika from the 1830s. A Japanese Yurikoi, I can't pronounce these words, artist created a woodblock print that offers a unique interpretation of the Kraken. In this artwork, the Kraken is portrayed as a monstrous cephalopod with its tentacles curling around a ship. The artist's use of intricate details and dynamic composition captures the essence of the Kraken's myth and its impact on maritime culture. And finally, the most recent, Release the Kraken by Henrik Nordenberg from 2010. This modern digital artwork by Henrik Nordenberg portrays the Kraken as a dynamic and action-packed scene. The artwork features a fearsome Kraken emerging from the depths to attack a ship as sailors scramble to defend themselves. The phrase, "Release the Kraken," has become a pop culture catchphrase, further highlighting the creature's enduring presence in modern media. Now, these artworks, spanning different time periods and artistic styles, offer a glimpse into the ways the Kraken has been portrayed over the centuries, whether capturing the creature's omniscient presence, the struggle of sailors against its grasp, or the awe-inspiring mystery of the deep. These depictions reflect the enduring fascination that the Kraken continues to evoke in both artists and audience alike. The Kraken story continues to evolve into the modern era, finding new life in popular culture. Films, television shows, video games, and more have drawn inspiration from the Kraken's myth, reimagining it for a contemporary audience. Notably, the Pirates of the Caribbean film franchise popularized the Kraken as a supernatural sea monster summoned to enforce maritime laws, codes, and curses. In this adaptation, the Kraken became a fearsome and destructive entity, embodying the darker side of the ocean's power and the unpredictable forces that sailors have long feared. By weaving the Kraken into a tale of pirates and curses, the franchise paid homage to its historical roots whilst adding a layer of fantastical storytelling that resonates with modern audiences. As I mentioned before, the phrase "release the Kraken" has become a popular catchphrase in modern culture, often used in a dramatic or humorous context to signal the unleashing of something powerful or formidable. However, its origin is relatively recent and can be traced back to the 2010 film Clash of the Titans, a remake of the 1981 film of the same name. In the 2010 film, "Release the Kraken" is uttered by the character Zeus, played by Liam Neeson. In the movie, Zeus commands the release of the Kraken, a massive sea monster, to wreak havoc upon the mortal realm as a means of punishing humanity. The phrase is used as a climactic moment in the film, signifying the impending doom that the Kraken's unleashed power represents. The scene and the line itself quickly gained attention and became a meme in internet culture. In fact, one of those memes hits very close to home. I live in Newcastle in Australia, and the state member for Newcastle is a man named Tim Krakenthorpe. And so when he was running for his office, I think someone graffitied his office and made it say "Release the Krakenthorpe." And the Krakenthorpe was released. He was elected, although I'm pretty sure today he lost his cabinet position because he didn't declare some earnings or some property that he owned. So sucks to suck. Sorry, bud. The combination of Liam Neeson's delivery and the awe-inspiring presence of the Kraken, as well as the dramatic orchestral score, created a memorable cinematic moment. As a result, "Release the Kraken" entered the popular culture as a catchphrase used humorously and dramatically in various contexts. Now, beyond the myth, the fiction, and the art, there is an intriguing connection between the Kraken's legend and the real-world wonders of the deep sea. The existence of colossal and giant squids, deep-sea creatures with massive eyes, powerful tentacles, and an elusive nature, has fueled speculation that these animals may have contributed to the Kraken's mythology. Encounters with these creatures, especially in a state of decomposition, could have given rise to exaggerated accounts that were woven into maritime folklore. In recent decades, scientific exploration has yielded remarkable discoveries that add a layer of credibility into the Kraken's legendary attributes. The colossal squid, for instance, inhabits the deepest and darkest reaches of the ocean. Though not matching the colossal proportions of the Kraken, the colossal squid possesses many of the features that resonate with the mythical creature, including immense eyes, a fearsome beak, and long, powerful tentacles. Now, while not often able to drag ships under the water, colossal squids do offer a glimpse into the kinds of creatures that could have inspired the Kraken's exaggerated attributes. The Kraken stands as a testament to the enduring power of myth and the interplay between human imagination and the mysteries of the natural world. Emerging from the maritime traditions of the Northern Europeans, the Kraken's myth has evolved over the centuries, shaping cultures and transcending its origins. It embodies humanity's simultaneous fascination with and fear of the unknown depths of the sea, serving as a symbol of the untamed forces that continue to stir our collective human curiosity. The Kraken's legacy extends beyond its mythic stature, offering insights into the intricate dance between storytelling and reality. As science continues to peel back the layers of the ocean's mysteries, the Kraken reminds us that while some of the legends featured find resonance in the natural world, its enduring allure is a testament to humanity's enduring need to explore, understand, and grapple with the world's enigmatic wonders. Whether a creature of pure fantasy or a reflection of real-world marvels, the Kraken remains an iconic symbol of the vast and mysterious depths that continue to beckon us into the unknown. His passion for wildlife and conservation, as well as larger-than-life personality, made him a global icon in the field of wildlife education and entertainment. Irwin's early life experiences set the stage for his remarkable journey into the world of wildlife conservation. Growing up in a family of animal lovers, Steve Irwin's fascination with wildlife began at an early age. His parents, Bob and Lynn Irwin, were wildlife experts who ran a small reptile park called the Queensland Reptile and Fauna Park in Beerwah, Queensland. Irwin's father, Bob, was a herpetologist and a keen advocate for reptile conservation, and he played a significant role in shaping Steve's passion for animals. As a young boy, Steve was actively involved in the family's wildlife park. He spent his days helping his parents care for various reptiles, including snakes, crocodiles, and lizards. Irwin's hands-on experience with these creatures allowed him to develop a deep understanding of their behavior and habitat, laying the foundation for his future career. Irwin's early interactions with wildlife were not limited to the confines of the family's park as well. His adventurous spirit led him to explore the natural surroundings of his home in Queensland. He spent countless hours observing and studying animals in their natural habitats, fostering a genuine love for the Australian wilderness. At the age of 9, Irwin received his first pet reptile, a scrub python named Fred. This event marked a pivotal moment in his life, solidifying his passion for reptiles. Irwin's parents encouraged his curiosity and provided him with knowledge and skills needed to handle various animals safely. The year before he was to receive Fred, in 1970, when he was just 8 years old, the family moved to Beerwah and they opened the Beerwah Reptile Park. Under the guidance of his parents, Irwin actively participated in the park's operations, gaining valuable experience in animal husbandry and conservation. His hands-on approach to wildlife care honed his expertise and instilled in him a profound respect for all living creatures. Irwin's teenage years were marked by the deepening commitment to wildlife conservation. Now, while most teenagers are out getting drunk and smoking ciggies and having sex, Steve Irwin became involved in various conservation projects and assisted his father in capturing and relocating problem crocodiles. These experiences further fueled his passion for crocodiles and their conservation. Irwin's unique ability to interact fearlessly with these powerful reptiles showcased his extraordinary bravery and dedication to raising awareness about the importance of preserving their natural habitats. Now, a few years later, in 1991, Steve Irwin took over the management of the family reptile park, which was later renamed to Australia Zoo. Under his leadership, the zoo underwent significant expansion, transforming it into a world-class facility for wildlife conservation. He emphasized education and conservation, aiming to inspire visitors to appreciate and protect the planet's diverse ecosystems. In the same year that he took over Australia Zoo, Steve met Terry Raines, an American naturalist from Eugene, Oregon, who was visiting the wildlife rehabilitation facilities in Australia and had decided to visit Australia Zoo. According to the couple, it was love at first sight. Terry said at the time, "I thought there was no one like this anywhere in the world. He sounded like an environmental Tarzan, a larger-than-life superhero." And there's some beautiful footage of the two talking about their meeting, and I'm going to play it for you now.
And I never expected to end up on the Sunshine Coast or visiting Beerwah. But sure enough, driving by, there was this little tiny sign and this little tiny zoo, and I thought, I'll just go in to check it out. I went through the gate, and Australia Zoo opened up into these beautiful gardens and happy animals, and then there was a crocodile demonstration going on with this guy. This man was in with a crocodile talking about animals the way you talk about what you had for lunch. And now I'm going to feed this huge crocodile. Isn't he a little beauty? The man was saying. And I thought, well, I never really thought of crocodiles as beautiful, but I'll have a look. And I stood and listened to him talk about crocodiles, that they were passionate lovers and beautiful mothers and what special animals they were. I thought, hang on, I've never heard anyone talk like that. And then he handed the crocodile some food. It came screaming out of the water, grabbed the piece of food, and he was as calm as if he was mailing a letter in a letterbox. I was sold. I thought, this man is the most incredible guy I have ever seen. He's probably married. He's got to be taken.
When I saw Terry in the crowd, I looked up and our eyes met. And my heart just went bang, 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 just started thumping. It was love at first sight. I know this sounds like it's coming out of some Mills and Boon love novel, but it's true. Love at first sight. Next thing, whoa! I remembered where I was. Agro's trying to kill me. So I wound up the demo. Yep, thanks for coming. And then she stayed back and talked to me.
He said hello, and I think I said something really clever like hi.
And crikey, our love just went ballistic.
And at that precise moment, Lori took a photograph of us. Now, that photo I still have to this day, and it is the funniest moment. I don't know if there's many married couples who have a photo of the exact moment they first met, but I'm lucky enough to have that shot.
Terry and Steve were engaged only 4 months later, and they were married in Eugene on the 4th of June 1992. Although the Irwins were happily married, they didn't wear wedding rings because they believed that in their line of work, wearing jewellery could pose a hazard to them and the animals. Terry and Steve spent their honeymoon trapping crocodiles together. Film footage of their honeymoon, taken by John Stainton, became the first episode of The Crocodile Hunter. His television debut came in the form of a documentary titled The Crocodile Hunter, which aired in 1992. The documentary showcased Irwin's fearlessness and passion for crocodiles and was met with widespread acclaim. Audiences were captivated by his daring encounters with these powerful reptiles and his genuine enthusiasm for educating people about the importance of preserving their natural habitats. The documentary marked the beginning of Irwin's journey into the world of television and paved the way to his rise for fame. The series debuted on Australian screens in 1996 and made its way into the North American television market the following year. The Crocodile Hunter became successful in the United States, the United Kingdom, and over 130 other countries, reaching 500 million people. Irwin's exuberant and enthusiastic presenting style, broad Australian accent, signature khaki shorts, and his catchphrase, "Crikey!" became known internationally. Sir David Attenborough praised Irwin for introducing so many people to the natural world, saying, "He taught them how wonderful and exciting it was. He was a born communicator." As the Crocodile Hunter series gained popularity, Irwin's fame soared to unprecedented heights. His infectious energy and unscripted, spontaneous style of presenting wildlife endeared him to viewers of all ages. Irwin's ability to connect with animals, combined with his signature catchphrase, "Crikey!" became synonymous with his persona. His show reached audiences in more than 100 countries, making him a household name and a beloved figure in the realm of wildlife conservation and entertainment. Irwin's impact extended far beyond the reach of a television screen, though. He used his fame to raise awareness about endangered species, habitat conservation, and the importance of preserving biodiversity. His work was, of course, not limited to crocodiles. He actively campaigned for the protection of various animals, including elephants, whales, and orangutans. Irwin's advocacy efforts resonated with people worldwide, inspiring many people to join the cause of wildlife conservation. American satellite and cable television channel Animal Planet ended The Crocodile Hunter with a series finale called Steve's Last Adventure. The last Crocodile Hunter documentary spanned 3 hours with footage of Irwin's across-the-world adventures in locations including the Himalayas, Yangtze River, Borneo, and Kruger National Park. Now, after The Crocodile Hunter, Irwin went on to star in other Animal Planet documentaries, including The Croc Files, The Crocodile Hunter Diaries, and New Breed Vets. Animal Planet also created the annual Croc Week Marathon, which lasted a week in the middle of June every year from 2000 to 2007. And a side note here, I know that it'll never be as popular as Shark Week, but I think Croc Week is an entirely underrated event, and we should celebrate it more. Now, while all of this was happening, Steve and Terry had 2 children together. They had a daughter whose name is Bindi Sue Irwin, who was born on the 24th of July, 1998, and they had a son named Robert Clarence Irwin, born on the 1st of December, 2003. Bindi Sue is jointly named after 2 of Steve Irwin's favourite animals, Bindi, a saltwater crocodile, and Sue, a Staffordshire Bull Terrier. Robert is named after Irwin's father Bob and Terry's father Clarence. Irwin once described his daughter Bindi as the reason he was put on this earth. His wife once said, "The only thing that could ever keep him away from the animals he loves are the people he loves even more." Irwin frequently said that if he was going to be remembered for anything, he hoped he would be remembered for being a good father. In 1998, Irwin continued his television career working with director Mark Strickson to present The 10 Deadliest Snakes in the World. He appeared on several episodes of The Tonight Show with Jay Leno, and in 2000, a FedEx commercial with Irwin lightheartedly dealt with the possibility of an occupational death from a snake bite and the fanciful notion that FedEx would have saved him if only FedEx was used. Under Steve Irwin's leadership, operations grew inside Australia Zoo. The television series, the Steve Irwin Conservation Foundation, later renamed to the Wildlife Warriors, and the International Crocodile Rescue improvements to the Australia Zoo included the Animal Planet Crocoseum, the Rainforest Aviary, and the Tiger Temple. Irwin had mentioned that he'd considered opening an Australia Zoo in Las Vegas, Nevada, and possibly other sites around the world. In 2001, Irwin appeared in a cameo role in the Eddie Murphy film Dr. Dolittle 2, in which an alligator warns Dolittle that he knows Irwin is going to grab him and he's prepared to attack when he does, but Dr. Dolittle fails to warn Irwin in time. Irwin's only starring feature film role was in 2002's The Crocodile Hunter: Collision Course, which was released to mixed reviews. In the film, Irwin, who portrays himself and performed numerous stunts, mistakes some CIA agents for poachers. He sets out to stop them from capturing a crocodile, which, unknown to him, has actually swallowed a tracking transmitter. The film won the Best Family Feature Film Award for a comedy film at the Young Artist Awards. The film was produced on a budget of about $12 million and grossed about $33 million. To promote the film, Irwin was featured in an animated short produced by Animex Entertainment for Intermix. In 2002, Irwin and his family appeared in the Wiggles video/DVD released Wiggly Safari, which was set in Australia Zoo and featured singing and dancing inspired by Australian animals. Irwin fronted an advertising campaign for the Ghan in 2003, a passenger train operating between Adelaide, Alice Springs, and Darwin. A Pacific National NR class locomotive was named after Steve Irwin as part of this campaign. Like many Australians, myself not included, he was an avid cricket fan. This was seen during his visit to Sri Lanka, where he played cricket with some local children and said, "I love cricket. It's a shame we have to go catch some snakes now." This was seen during the Crocodile Hunter episode Island of Snakes. Irwin also loved mixed martial arts competitions and trained with Greg Jackson in the fighting grappling system Gaedo Jitsu. Having grown up in Essendon, Irwin was a fan of the Essendon Bombers, an Australian rules football club in the Australian Rules Football League. Irwin took part in Australian rules football promotion in Los Angeles as part of Australia Week in early 2006. Having lived in Queensland for most of his life, Irwin was also a fan of rugby league. As a teenager, he played for the I nearly said Cronulla Sharks, but it's a different team, the Canulra Sharks, as a second rower, and as an adult he was known to be a passionate Brisbane Broncos fan and was involved with the club on several occasions. On one occasion, after turning up to training, he asked if he could tackle the largest player, Shane Webber. Despite being thrown to the ground and looking like he'd been crushed, he was jovial about the experience. Irwin also supported rugby union, being a fan of the national team, the Wallabies. He once wore a Wallaby jersey during a demonstration at the zoo. A behind-the-scenes episode of The Crocodile Hunter showed Irwin and the crew finding a petrol station in a remote part of Namibia to watch the Wallabies defeat France in the 1999 Rugby World Cup final. Steve was also an avid, talented surfer. Now, Steve Irwin was not without his controversies. The Crocodile Hunter was undeniably a beloved figure in the realm of wildlife conservation and entertainment, and his infectious enthusiasm and daring interactions with animals made him a global icon, and he remains an enduring symbol of passionate advocacy for wildlife. However, like many public figures, Irwin's life and work were not without controversy. Several issues and incidents have sparked debates and discussions shaping the complex legacy of this iconic conservationalist. Critics have raised concerns about Irwin's hands-on approach to handling animals, particularly dangerous reptiles such as crocodiles. And while he was celebrated for his fearlessness and ability to showcase the beauty of wildlife up close, some argued that his methods were too risky and could potentially stress out or harm the animals. Ethical debates often centered around the balance between educating the public and ensuring the well-being of individual animals involved. Irwin often faced accusation of wildlife harassment, especially related to his interactions with marine animals. Some marine biologists and environmentalists argued that his actions, such as approaching marine creatures too closely or interfering with their natural behaviors, could disrupt ecosystems and disturb the animals. These criticisms led to debate about the ethical boundaries of wildlife filming and education. In 2004, Irwin caused his most public outcry when he held his 1-month-old son, Bob Irwin, while feeding a crocodile during a live show. When Irwin defended his actions as a way to teach his children about wildlife from an early age, people expressed concerns about the safety of the child. The incident sparked debates about responsible parenting and appropriate risk-taking, especially in the context of wildlife-related activities. Comparisons were made in the press to the Michael Jackson dangling his son out of a German hotel window incident. In addition, some child welfare groups, animal rights groups, and some of Irwin's television viewers criticized his actions as irresponsible and tantamount to child abuse. Irwin eventually apologized on the US NBC show Today. Now, both he and his wife publicly stated that Irwin was in complete control of the situation, as he dealt with crocodiles since he was a small child, and based on his lifetime of experience, neither he nor his son were ever in any danger. He also showed the footage of the event shot from a different angle, demonstrating that they were much further away from the crocodile than they had appeared in the publicized clip. Terry said their child was in no more danger than being taught to swim. No charges were filed, according to one journalist. Irwin told officials he would not repeat the action. The incident prompted Queensland government to change its crocodile handling laws, banning children and untrained adults from entering crocodile enclosures.
This is the moment Steve Irwin caused worldwide controversy, dangling 1-month-old baby Robert near a 4-metre crocodile 18 years ago.
It's about time Bob got out there and did his first croc demo.
The crocodile hunter apologised.
In front of that crocodile, I was in complete control.
But it's been revealed that stunt stripped Steve Irwin Australian of the Year in 2004. Swimming identity Lisa Curry was chair of the National Australia Day Council at the time. Excerpts from her soon-to-be-released book published in the Courier Mail reveal she felt it was a mistake. Wildlife expert Steve Irwin was a no-brainer to win. It was so hard to make a decision to take away somebody's award which they'd won fair and square. Cricketer Steve Waugh was awarded instead.
And I actually remember the media frenzy around this event. People took it really seriously. Some people were saying that he should have his kids taken away from him, which I think was very crazy. I think these people might just be a little jealous. Now, some conservationists and ecologists raised concerns about the potential impact of Irwin's fame on wildlife conservation efforts. While his ability to captivate audiences undoubtedly raised awareness about endangered species and their habitats, critics argued that the emphasis on charismatic megafauna such as crocodiles and snakes overshadowed the conservation needs of lesser-known but equally important species. This controversy highlights the challenge of balancing the public's interest in charismatic animals with the broader conservation goals. Irwin also faced some criticisms related to cultural appropriation, particularly his portrayal of Indigenous Australian culture. Some argued that his enthusiastic adoption of Australian slang and Indigenous-inspired clothing and accessories were examples of cultural appropriation, raising questions about the respectful representation and appreciation of Indigenous culture in the media. Irwin was a passionate conservationalist and believed in promoting environmentalism by sharing his excitement about the natural world rather than preaching to people. He was concerned with conservation of endangered animals and land clearing leading to loss of habitat. He considered conservation to be the most important part of his work. I consider myself a wildlife warrior. My mission is to save the world's endangered species. Irwin bought large tracts of land in Australia, Vanuatu, Fiji, and the United States, which he described as like national parks, and he stressed the importance of people realizing that they can make a difference. Irwin founded the Steve Irwin Conservation Foundation, which became an independent charity and was later renamed the Wildlife Warriors Worldwide, which I was a member of when I was young, actually. He also helped found the International Crocodile Rescue, the Lynn Irwin Memorial Fund, named in memory of his mother who died in an automobile crash in 2000, and the Ironbark Station Wildlife Rehabilitation Facility. Irwin urged people to take part in considerate tourism and to not support illegal poaching through the purchase of items such as turtle shells or shark fin soup. Sir David Attenborough was an inspiration to Irwin, according to his widow. When presenting a Lifetime Achievement Award to Attenborough after Irwin's death at the British National Television Awards on the 31st of October 2006, Terry Irwin said, "If there's one person who directly inspired my husband, it's the person being honoured tonight. Steve's real, true love was conservation, and the influence of tonight's recipient in preserving the natural world has been immense." Attenborough reciprocated by praising Irwin for introducing so many people to the natural world, saying, "He taught them how wonderful and exciting it was. He was a born communicator." On September 4th, 2006, the world lost a beloved icon of wildlife conservation and adventure. Steve Irwin's tragic death sent shockwaves through the global community, leaving millions of fans mourning the loss of a passionate conservationalist, an educator, and television personality. Irwin's life was marked by fearless encounters with some of the world's most dangerous creatures, but it was seemingly routine wildlife expeditions that ended up in an unexpected tragedy, forever altering the landscape of environmental advocacy. The incident occurred off the coast of Port Douglas in Queensland, Australia, during the filming of a documentary titled Ocean's Deadliest. Irwin, an experienced and skilled diver, was in the water near Bat Reef, an area renowned for its rich marine biodiversity. While on a break from filming, Steve decided to try and capture some footage for his daughter Bindy's upcoming television series. While exploring underwater, Irwin encountered a creature that would tragically lead to his untimely demise, a short-tailed stingray. Stingrays are generally docile creatures, but they do possess a venomous barb on their tail, which they use in self-defense. In a rare and unfortunate turn of events, Irwin seems to have accidentally approached the stingray in a way that provoked the animal. The stingray's tail struck Irwin in the chest, delivering a fatal blow. Despite the efforts of the crew and emergency medical response, Steve Irwin succumbed to his injuries and was pronounced dead at the scene. He was 44 years old.
Australian crocodile hunter Steve Irwin has died during a diving expedition near Port Douglas in Australia.
Well, it's reported the environmentalist was killed after being stabbed by a stingray barb in the chest while filming an underwater documentary on the Great Barrier Reef. Steve Irwin, who owned and ran the Australia Zoo with his family, shot to international fame with his Crocodile Hunter television series and films.
I'm Steve Irwin. You might know me as the Crocodile Hunter.
This was classic Steve Irwin, combining a love of the Australian wildlife with a confidence in front of the camera few could match.
Bird-eating spider. Ah! Just kidding.
The so-called Crocodile Hunter was killed during the underwater filming of his latest documentary. It's believed the 44-year-old father of two died after being stabbed through the chest by a stingray barb. He was taken to the surface by crew members but was pronounced dead shortly afterwards. He was working on the Great Barrier Reef in northeastern Queensland when the accident happened.
Today the world has lost a great wildlife icon, a passionate conservationist, and one of the proudest dads on the planet. He died what he did, he loved doing best. And he left this world in a happy and peaceful state of mind. He would have said, Croc's thrill.
You never know what's out there.
Irwin was famous for his television programme Crocodile Hunter, which was first broadcast in Australia in 1992 and has been broadcast around the world on the Discovery Channel.
He first got involved with animals when his parents opened a small reptile park in Queensland in 1970, and that grew into the Australia Zoo, and Steve has been managing that for the last 10 years or so. As a boy, apparently he spent more time with wild animals than domestic pets. When he was 9, his father taught him how to dive in rivers and catch crocodiles.
Steve Irwin was sometimes a controversial figure. He was criticised for carrying his baby son whilst feeding a crocodile in front of crowds at his zoo.
Yeah, that Bob! Yay! Pretty summer, you beauty!
Most, though, will remember him for his larger-than-life personality and his enthusiasm for the wildlife he worked so closely with. Victoria Gatenby, Sky News.
The New Jersey shark attacks of 1916 were a series of shark attacks that occurred along the shore of New Jersey in the United States between July 1st and July 12 of 1916. 4 people were killed and 1 person was wounded as a result of the attacks. The incidents took place in the US during a fatal summer heat wave and a polio outbreak, both of which attracted thousands of people to the beach resorts of the New Jersey shore. Since 1916, academics have argued over which species of sharks was to blame and the total number of animals involved, with the great white shark and the bull shark being among the most commonly mentioned candidates. Personal and national reactions to the killings included a surge of terror that led to shark hunts with the goal of destroying the number of so-called man-eating sharks and defending the economies of New Jersey's beachfront municipalities. Steel nets were installed on the public beaches of resort towns in order to protect beachgoers and swimmers. Before 1916, most of what was known about sharks in the scientific community was based on speculation and assumption. Ichthyologists were compelled to rethink the commonly held assumptions regarding the capabilities of sharks and the dynamic of shark attacks as a result of these assaults. The assaults that took place on the Jersey Shore almost instantly made their way into popular culture in the US, where they led to sharks being portrayed as dangerous caricatures in editorial cartoons. The first attack. The first major attack took place on Saturday, July 1st in a tourist town known as Beach Haven, which is located on Long Beach Island, which is located off the shore of New Jersey's southmost tip. Charles Epping Van Sant, a Philadelphia resident who was 28 years old at the time, was spending his vacation at the Ingleside Hotel with his family. Before going inside for dinner, Van Sant made the decision to go for a little swim in the ocean with a Chesapeake Bay retriever that was running along the beach. Van Sant's yelling could be heard not long after he entered the water. Bathers thought he was calling out to the dog, but in reality, a shark was viciously attacking Van Sant's legs. Alexander Ott, a lifeguard, and Sheridan Taylor, a bystander, dragged Van Sant out of the water while he was bleeding, and according to Ott and Taylor, the shark followed him to the shore as they did. The flesh was torn away from Van Sant's left leg, and at 6:45 p.m., he bled to death on the manager's desk of the Ingleside Hotel. The beaches around the Jersey Shore remained open for business even after the attack on Van Sant. Sea captains who were approaching the ports of Newark and New York City reported seeing enormous sharks swimming off the coast of Jersey, but these sightings were brushed off as unsubstantiated rumors. After the death at Beach Haven, experts and members of the press were initially hesitant to point the finger of blame at sharks for the passing of Charles Van Sant. According to a source in the New York Times, Van Sant was brutally attacked in the surf by a fish, possibly a shark. However, the state fish commissioner of Pennsylvania and former director of the Philadelphia Aquarium, James M. Meehan, asserted the Philadelphia Public Ledger that the shark had been preying on the dog and had bitten Van Sant by accident. Meehan explicitly played down the danger of sharks presented to humans by saying,
"Despite the death of Charles Van Sant and the report of 2 sharks having been caught in the vicinity recently, I do not believe there is any reason why people should hesitate to go in swimming at the beaches for fear of man-eaters. The information in regard to the sharks is indefinite, and I hardly believe that Van Sant was bitten by a man-eater. Van Sant was in the surf playing with a dog, and it may be that a small shark had drifted at high water and was marooned by the tide. Being unable to move quickly and without food, he had come in to bite the dog and snapped at the man in passing."
The second attack. The second major assault by a shark took place on Thursday, July 6, 1916, at the resort town of Spring Lake, which is located in the state of New Jersey and is approximately 72 kilometers north of Beach Haven. Charles Bruder, 27, a Swiss Belle captain of the Essex and Sussex Hotel, was identified as the deceased individual. While Bruder was swimming around 120 meters away from the shore, he was attacked. Bruder was bitten by a shark which ripped off both of his legs and bit him on the belly, turning the water a bright red scarlet color. A lady alerted 2 lifeguards that a canoe with a red hull had capsized and was drifting just below the surface of the water after hearing screams coming in from the direction of the lake. Chris Anderson and George White, who were both lifeguards, were in a boat when they rowed to Bruder and discovered that he'd been attacked by a shark. They were able to remove him from the sea, but he died of bleeding long before they could get him onto the land. Quote,
"Women were panic-stricken and collapsed when Bruder's disfigured body was dragged ashore,"
as reported by the New York Times. Money was donated for Bruder's mother in Switzerland by patrons and employees of the Essex and Sussex Hotel, as well as establishments in the surrounding areas. After this second incident, the response from the media was much more sensational. An article was featured on the front page of a number of prominent newspapers in the United States, including the Boston Herald, the Chicago Sun-Times, the Philadelphia Inquirer, the Washington Post, and the San Francisco Chronicle. The title of the headline that appeared in the New York Times was "Shark Kills Bather Off Jersey Beach." As the fear spread, resort owners in New Jersey lost an estimated $200,000, which is $6.2 million in today's money, in tourism revenue, and the number of people sunbathing dropped by as much as 25% in certain areas. On July 8, 1916, at the American Museum of Natural History, a news conference was held with scientists Frederick Augustus Lucas, John Treadwell Nicholas, and Robert Cushman Murphy serving as panelists. In an effort to quell the mounting concern, the 3 men emphasized how unusual it was to have a third encounter with a shark, despite the fact that they were amazed that sharks had bitten anyone at all. However, Nichols, the lone ichthyologist in the group, advised swimmers to keep a safe distance from the water's edge and to make use of the netted bathing sections that had been built at public beaches following the initial assault. Following these attacks, there was an uptick in the number of shark sightings around the mid-Atlantic Ocean. On July 8th, armed motorboats were patrolling the beach at Spring Creek, pursuing an animal they believed to be a shark. As Asbury Park's Asbury Avenue Beach was closed after lifeguard Benjamin Everingham claimed to have beaten off a 12-foot-long, 4-meter-long shark with an oar. Both incidents occurred on the same day. In addition to Bayonne, New Jersey, Rocky Point, New York, Bridgeport, Connecticut, Jacksonville, Florida, and Mobile, Alabama, a columnist from the Field and Stream captured a sandbar shark in the surf at Beach Haven, New Jersey. Gertrude Hoffman, an actress, said that she'd been attacked by a shark while swimming at the beach at Coney Island shortly after the fatalities had occurred in Matawan. According to the New York Times, Hoffman
had the presence of mind to remember that she had read in the Times that a bather may drive away a shark by splashing, and she beat up the water violently.
The third and fourth attacks. On Wednesday, July 12, there were 2 more big assaults that took place at Matawan Creek, which is close to the town of Keyport, Matawan, which is situated 48 kilometers north of Spring Lake and inland of Raritan Bay, which is more reminiscent of a town in the Midwest than it is an Atlantic Beach resort. Due to its location, Matawan was not expected to be a spot where sharks and people interacted with one another. Thomas Cottrell, a sea captain who lived in Madawan, reported seeing a shark in the stream that was 8 feet long, but the locals didn't believe him. Lester Stillwell, who was 11 years old, was one of a group of local children who was enjoying themselves in the stream at about 2 p.m. One of the boys had taken his dog along with him, and all three of them ended up going for a swim together. They came upon what seemed to be an old, black, weather-beaten plank, or a weathered wood, at an area that was referred to as Wyckoff Dock. When a shark's dorsal fin suddenly appeared in the water, the lads immediately recognized it as such. The shark grabbed Stillwell just as he was about to get out of the creek and pulled him underneath. The lads raced into town for assistance, where they were met by numerous adults, one of who was Watson Stanley Fisher, a local businessman who was 24 years old at the time. As Fisher and the others searched for Stillwell on the creek, they were under the impression that he had experienced a seizure. After seeing the body of the youngster and making an attempt to get it to shore, Fisher was also attacked by the shark in front of the people of the town, and he was subsequently unable to save Stillwell. At around 5:30 in the evening, he was taken to Monmouth Memorial Hospital on Long Branch, with severe injuries to his right thigh, but he was unable to survive the bleeding and passed away. On July 14th, the body of Stillwell was found 46 meters upstream of the Wyckoff Dock. Local governments in the state of New Jersey had taken steps to safeguard bathers and the economy from sharks that devour humans. Following the Everingham incident, the only beach that continued to be accessible to the public was the 4th Avenue Beach, located in Asbury Park. This beach was secured by a steel wire mesh fence and patrolled by armed motorboats. Following the attacks on Stillwell, Fisher, and Dunn, people of Madawan placed nets along the banks of the Madawan Creek and set off dynamite in an attempt to capture or kill the shark that was responsible for the assaults. Aris B. Henderson, the mayor of Madawan, gave the order to the Madawan Journal to print 2 wanted posters offering the reward of $100 or $2,500 in 2021 currency to anyone who killed a shark in the creek. In spite of the efforts of the town, no sharks were successfully captured or eliminated in Madawan Creek. The 5th and final assault. Nearly 30 minutes after the deadly assaults on Stillwell and Fisher, the 5th and final victim was New York City resident Joseph Dunn, aged 14, who was assaulted half a mile from the Wyckoff Pier. Dunn is the youngest of the 5 victims. After a fierce encounter with the shark in which they engaged in a tug-of-war, Dunn was rescued by his brother and a friend. The shark had bitten off his left leg. Joseph Dunn was brought into St. Peter's University Hospital in New Brunswick, where he received treatment for his bite. On September 15, 1916, he was discharged after recovering from his injuries. A petition was sent to the federal government by resort communities located along the New Jersey shore, requesting assistance from the government in protecting beaches and hunting sharks. The U.S. House of Representatives allocated $5,000, equivalent to $120,000 today, towards the elimination of the threat posed by sharks in the state of New Jersey, and President Woodrow Wilson called a meeting of his cabinet to consider the fatal shark attacks. William Gibbs McAdoo, which is a great name, was the Secretary of the Treasury, made the suggestion that the Coast Guard should be activated to police the New Jersey shore and safeguard those who were tanning. The Atlanta Constitution reported on July 14th that armed shark hunters in motorboats patrolled New York and New Jersey coast today, while others lined the beach in concerted efforts to exterminate the man-eaters. This led to shark hunts occurring all along the coast of New York and New Jersey. Governor James Fairman Fielder of New Jersey and many of the municipalities in the state provided rewards to those who successfully hunted sharks. As a direct consequence of the assaults, the East Coast saw the capture of hundreds of sharks in its waters. The hunt for sharks along the East Coast had been called the greatest scale animal hunt in the history of hunting. After the second assault, both experts in the field and members of the general public began offering their explanations to which type of shark was responsible for the attacks of the people in the Jersey Shore, or whether numerous sharks were involved. Lucas and Nichols came up with a hypothesis that the offender was a renegade shark that was moving northward. They were under the impression that it would eventually make its way to the coast of New York City. It was assured that the shark would swim along the south shore of Long Island, and the first deep water inlet would be Jamaica Bay, unless it came through the harbor and went through the north through Hell's Gate and Long Island Sound.
If it did not do either of those things, it was assumed that it would swim along the south shore of Long Island.
According to eyewitness accounts of the deadly shark attacks in Beach Haven, the shark there was around 9 feet long in length. A ship captain who witnessed the incident speculated the creature was a Spanish shark that had been driven out of the Caribbean Sea before the bombs that took place during the Spanish-American War. In the days that followed the assaults, a number of fishermen made claims that they'd successfully caught the New Jersey man-eater. On July 14, a blue shark was brought to the surface near Long Branch, and on July 18, the same Thomas Cottrell who had seen the shark in Matawan Creek claimed to have brought a sandbar shark to the surface with a gill net near the mouth of the creek. Both of these events took place in the vicinity of Long Branch. Michael Schleiser, a taxidermist from Harlem and former lion tamer with Barnum and Bailey, was fishing in Rataran Bay around July 14 when he reeled in a 7'5", 325-pound shark. The catch occurred just a few miles from the entrance of the Matawan Creek. Before Schleiser killed the shark with a broken oar, the shark came dangerously close to sinking his boat. When he cut up the guts of the shark, he pulled out a strange meaty stuff and bones that looked roughly 2/3 of a milk crate and weighed 15 pounds collectively. The shark was determined to be a juvenile great white, and the remains that he consumed were determined to be human. Schleiser stuffed and mounted the shark, then put it on display in the window of a business on Broadway in Manhattan. However, the item was subsequently misplaced. The only image that has been preserved was published in the Bronx Home News. Following the capture of Schleiser's great white shark during the summer of 1916 near the Jersey Shore, there were no other reports of attacks by great white sharks. Murphy and Lucas referred to the great white as the Jersey man-eater in their announcement. Skeptical people, on the other hand, propose alternate ideas, such as opinions suggesting that a culprit was not a shark, or even the effect of ongoing events related to World War I. Barrett P. Smith of Sound Beach, New York, located more than 135 miles away on the opposite end of Long Island, stated the following in a letter to the New York Times.
After reading a great deal of interest in the description of the fatality that occurred off the coast of Spring Lake, New Jersey, I would like to make a proposal that is somewhat in contrast to the shark notion. Many people, including many scientists, feel it was far more plausible that a sea turtle was the one that attacked, despite the fact that scientists say it is extremely unlikely that a shark was the one who attacked. Scientists have spent a significant amount of time at sea and along the coast, and throughout that time, they have had many opportunities to see turtles that were large enough to cause wounds of this type. It is widely believed that Bruder may have awakened one of these animals while it was sleeping on or close to the surface. These creatures have a reputation for being ferocious, and when they become agitated, they present an immense risk to anybody who approaches them.
In another letter to the New York Times, the author of the letter attributed the presence of sharks in the area to activities of German U-boats that had been operating in the area.
These sharks may have consumed human carcasses in the water of the German war zone and followed ships to shore, or possibly followed the Deutschland herself, anticipating the normal toll of drowning men, women, and children,
stated the author, who wished to remain anonymous. The author draws the conclusion
this would explain both their brazen behavior and their desire to consume human flesh.
After more than a century has passed, there is no agreement among experts on the inquiry and discoveries made by Murphy and Lucas. Richard G. Fernicola, the author of 2 studies on the incident, says
there are numerous explanations about the New Jersey assaults, but that none of them are definitive.
Fernicola's investigations were published in both of his books. In general, a number of researchers, including Thomas Helm, Harold W. McCormack, Thomas B. Allen, William Young, Jean Campbell Butler, and Michael Capuzzo, concur with Murphy and Douglas. Nevertheless, in 2000, a National Geographic Society published a paper stating that
some researchers are of the opinion that the great white shark is probably not to blame for the majority of attacks that have been attributed to the species. These individuals believe that the less well-known bull shark is the true perpetrator behind many of the reported incidents, including the infamous shark attacks that took place in New Jersey in 1916, which may have served as the inspiration for the film Jaws.
According to the findings of 2 marine biologists named George A. Lano and Richard Ellis, a bull shark may have been responsible for the attacks that resulted in fatalities along the New Jersey shore. Bull sharks are known to enter freshwater rivers and streams after swimming in the ocean, and they have been responsible for attacks on humans in a variety of countries. Lano wrote these words in his book titled Sharks Attacks on Man, which was published in 1975.
One of the things that took people by surprise the most about the attacks in Matawan Creek was how far away they were from the ocean. There are further incidences of well-documented shark-human interactions at Ahwan, Iran, which is 90 miles upriver from the sea. These narratives may be found in other parts of the book. There are sharks in Lake Nicaragua, which is a body of fresh water. In 1944, there was a prize given for the heads of deceased freshwater sharks because they had killed and badly injured lake bathers recently. This information may also be of interest to you.
Ellis draws attention to the fact that the great white is an animal that lives in the ocean, and Schleiss's shark in the picture was taken in a river. To say that finding it swimming in a tidal creek is rare would be an understatement. To suggest that it is even feasible would be a stretch. The bull shark, on the other hand, is notorious for venturing into fresh water, in addition to being known for its combative and belligerent disposition. It is true, he says, that the bull shark is not a common species in the waters of New Jersey. However, it does occur more frequently than the great white. An ichthyologist by the name of George H. Burgess speculated in an interview with Michael Capuzzo
that the species involved has always been doubtful and will likely continue to generate spirited debate.
However, Burgess does not dismiss the possibility of a great white. Because of the location, Matawan Creek, it is indicative or brackish of fresh waters, which is a habitat that bulls visit and whites avoid. The bull receives a significant number of votes. However, our investigation of the location indicates that the stream, its depth, and the salinity regime were more similar to a marine embayment, and that smaller great whites definitely might have drifted into the region. These are all things that point to the possibility that the animal was present. Because a great white shark of adequate size that had human remains in its stomach was captured in the area not long after the attacks, and there were no more attacks afterwards, it seems likely that this was the shark that was involved in at least the Matawan killing. The chronicle and geographic order in which the occurrences occurred lends credence to the theory that the same shark was responsible for some of the earlier attacks. The victims of the attacks that took place in 1916 are documented as having been killed by a great white in the International Shark Attack File, the director of which is Burgess. The rising number of people in the water was identified as a contributing element in the attacks.
The number of people living in the world is constantly increasing, which in turn has led to an increase in the number of people interested in participating in aquatic leisure. The amount of people that go into the ocean has a significant impact on the total number of shark attacks that occur each year or in a geographical area.
However, there is still debate over the possibility that one shark was involved. Based on the data that Lucas and Murphy gave in 1916, a number of scientists, including Victor M. Coppelson and Gene Butler, have concluded that a single shark was to blame for the incident. Richard Fernicola, on the other hand, notes that in 1916 it was a shark year, since fishermen and captains reported seeing hundreds of sharks swimming in the mid-Atlantic region in the United States. Ellis makes the observation that
to attempt to make facts as we know them correspond to the rogue shark idea is pushing sensationalism and believability past reasonable boundaries. It is an admission on his part that the evidence is long gone, and we will never really know if it was one shark or numerous, one species or another was involved.
In the 2011 episode of Real Story Jaws on the Smithsonian Channel, more research was carried out. The events that transpired are analysed in further detail throughout the documentary from a variety of vantage points. It was demonstrated, for instance, that the Matawan Creek attacks, that a full moon of the lunar cycle which could have coincided with the attacks would have raised the salinity in the water by more than double digits, just a few hours before high tide. This was demonstrated by the fact that it would have occurred just a few hours before high tide. This would lend credence to the idea that a great white shark was potentially responsible for what happened. Other evidence, such as Joseph Dunn's inquiries, revealed that the sort of bite was more likely made by a bull shark as opposed to a great white shark. This led to some people to conclude that more than one shark was probably involved in the 5 instances that took place in 1916. So, cephalopods, including octopuses, squids, and cuttlefish, can all be potentially dangerous to humans in certain situations. Now, while most of these species are generally not aggressive towards humans, they do possess some characteristics that can pose risk to human life. For example, some species have dangerous bites. They have bird-like beaks in their mouths that can pierce skin and cause injury. Additionally, some species can release venom, which can cause discomfort or even kill human beings. Of course, we talked about the blue ring octopus last week. Cephalopods also have a defensive tactic called ink sacs, which when triggered, they release a cloud of ink into the water. This obscures their escape route, but can also create a dangerous situation, potentially reducing visibility for divers or confusion for nearby predators such as sharks. These creatures are also masters of camouflage, able to rapidly change color and texture to blend into their surroundings. Now, while this behavior is mainly used for defensive purposes to evade predators, it can inadvertently lead to encounters with unsuspecting humans who may have inadvertently provoked them. Now, furthermore, some cephalopods, like squids, have jet propulsion abilities, which is a very cool sentence to read out loud. By expelling water from their bodies, they can move rapidly through bodies of water. Now, while this is usually used for escape from predators, it can create a forceful water movement that can be hazardous to swimmers or divers who are in close proximity. And finally, of course, the cephalopod's most distinctive feature, their tentacles. Squids and octopuses have powerful and flexible tentacles adorned with suction cups that, while they may attempt to grab onto objects they perceive as food or potential threats. Now, while such behavior is uncommon with humans, accidental encounters or deliberate attempts to handle them can lead to unintended consequences. Cephalopod attacks on humans have been reported since ancient times. A significant portion of these attacks are questionable or unverified tabloid stories. Cephalopods are members of the class Cephalopoda, which includes all squids, octopuses, cuttlefish, and nautiluses. Some members of these groups are capable of causing injury and death to humans, and we are going to go through the members of this species or this member of this family, which can cause the most dangerous situations to humans. Starting, of course, with the most common, the common octopus. The common octopus is the octopus you think of when I say octopus, right? Close your eyes. Even if you're driving, you know the drill. Octopus. What you just had pop into your head, that's what this thing looks like. It's considered to be the most intelligent of all invertebrates. The common octopus is found in tropical and temperate waters of the world's oceans. They can grow to about 4.3 feet in length, and they weigh up to 22 pounds, although averages are much smaller. They prey on crabs, crayfish, mollusks, and will sometimes use their ink to disorient their victims before attacking. So I have here a list of people who have claimed to have been attacked by common octopuses or who have reported attacks from common octopuses. The first one is from a person named Alfred Brehm. I believe German, maybe? Alfred Brehm. This guy was making his moves in the 1800s. So Alfred Brehm, he was one of the most significant naturalists of the 19th century. Naturalists, I believe, means the study of nature, not walking around naked, just for anyone who's confused by that. In the section on the giant squid in his famous book, The Life of Animals, he mentions, I don't know what nationality he is, so we're just going to make him British. Or should we make him German? Let's go German. In Life of Animals, he mentions, most of the data of these giant octopuses can be found in Montfort's books, The Natural History of Mollusks. There is talk of a sea monster grabbing the mast of a ship down off the coast of Angola with his arms and almost pulling the ship down into the abyss. On the occasion of which the lucky crewmember painted the great danger in a vow in the chapel of St. Thomas in Malo. He further talks about another creature in the wake of Montfort, Captain Danes. It pulled some sailors off the ship's rack with his arms near St. Ilola. The end of one arm, which was stuck in the rigging of the ship, which had been cut off, proved to be 25 feet long and had several rows of suction discs on it. I distracted myself with my amazing German accent, but essentially what he's saying is a bunch of people were kind of pulled off the ship by potentially a giant octopus. Of course, this is from the 1800s, so it's very hard to verify this one. But closer to, recent times, still in the 1800s, this guy was from, he was born in 1869 and he died in 1932, so more recent. An American traveler named Frederick O'Brien, he reports that during his research in the Marquis Islands, that a relative of one of the locals was killed by a large octopus living in the coastal countryside. Another story took place on an undetermined date, but we know that it was some point in the early 20th century. A diver was attacked by a large octopus in the military port of Toulon. The diver almost drowned and lost consciousness. Luckily, the diver's companions were able to pull him out of the water. Only then could they remove the animal. The octopus weighed about 60 kilograms and had 8 legs. Which is obvious. I misread that, sorry. Had legs 8 meters long. That's, Jesus Christ, that's huge. Holy moly, that is a big octopusy. This is a new story, according to Pernetti in the book Voyage au Lieu Maloney. My French is as good as my German. Off the coast of Angola, a huge 8-armed octopus, we've mentioned that 8 arms is kind of standard, we don't have to keep saying that, a huge 8-armed octopus climbed aboard. It was so severe that the ship capsized halfway. The rest of the story is unknown. Now, Victor Hugo, I thought he might come up in this. Victor Hugo, of course, the guy who wrote 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. In French writer Victor Hugo's novel Toilers of the Sea, an imaginary fight between the novel's main hero and an octopus takes place. Hugo also comments on the allegations of similar events. An engraving in Sonetti's edition of Buffoon represents a cephalopod crushing a frigate. I just have to go. I can't do the accent. Dennis Montfort, who we mentioned in a previous story, in fact considers the pulp, or the octopod, of high latitude strong enough to destroy a ship. Boris St. Vincent doubts this, but he shows that in our regions they will attack men. Near Brec'h in Sark, they show a cave where a devilfish a few years since seized and drowned a lobster fisher. I think the devilfish is their word for octopus. Perron and Lamarck are in error in their belief that their pulp, having no fins, cannot swim. He who writes these lines has seen with his own eyes at Sark, in the cavern called Butors, a poivre swimming and pursuing a bather. When captured and killed, the specimen was found to be 4 English feet broad, and it was possible to count 400 suckers. 400 suckers, by the way, that's a Trump rally. Oh, political. Sorry, I don't mean to get political. I love you all. The monster thrust them out convulsively in the agony of his death. Other sources confirm one of these stories. I realize that this is very poorly written, but it's very old, and he was French, so that's probably why. Now, while octopuses generally avoid humans, attacks have occasionally been verified. For example, a 240 centimeter, which is about 8 foot, Pacific octopus, said to be nearly camouflaged, approached a diver and attempted to wrap itself around the diver and his camera. Another diver recorded the encounter on video. The divers speculated that the octopus may have thought its reflection in the camera lens was a smaller octopus, which may have motivated it to attack. Now, there was apparently a supposed octopus attack on a Staten Island ferry in New York City, which allegedly led to the loss of the ferry and is commemorated by a bronze sculpture installed in 2016. This never actually occurred. It was all a prank, nor was there ever such a ferry disaster. The artist responsible for the sculpture admitted that it was a multimedia art project and social experiment, not maliciously aimed to talk about how gullible people can be. Now, we've talked about a few stories. At this point of the episode, we need to stop and we need to have a serious talk about octopus wrestling. Have you ever heard of octopus wrestling before? No, you haven't, because I haven't heard of it, and I host a podcast all about this shit. I make it my business to know this weird stuff. Okay, so in researching all this lovely stuff about my favorite cephalopod, the octopus, I learned that there is apparently a sport that was quite popular in the 1960s called octopus wrestling. So I've got some information for you. Essentially, what octopus wrestling was divers would willingly grapple with octopuses and in a sport called octopus wrestling. It was a then popular sport in coastal areas of the United States. So it just goes to show that, it's been 60 years since this happened. The US has not recently become crazy. They were doing weird shit the whole time. Octopus wrestling involves a diver grappling with a large octopus in shallow water and dragging it to the surface. So although it's called wrestling, it's not actually wrestling per se. As most octopuses, as we have talked about, they're rather skittish and they would rather fuck off rather than engaging with a weird American with a dad bod wading into your house. They're not aggressive at all unless they are provoked, which, usually provocation ends with an octopus fucking off. But sometimes they're not able to fuck off fast enough and they end up being wrestled by some guy. The contestants were usually only searching in holes along rocks and in the ocean to grab the head of an octopus. Once a diver caught an octopus, he continued to pull up until the animal gave up. Isn't that fucking weird? An early article on octopus wrestling appeared in a 1949 issue of Mechanics Illustrated, which is a weird... I mean, I don't know if mechanics is spelled mechanics with an X at the end, so maybe it's a different thing, but it's if it's about mechanics, like cars, that's odd. I don't know why. I don't understand the relevance of wrestling an octopus out of its home to someone who's just like trying to buy a new muffler, but whatever. A report from the Toledo Blade. The Toledo Blade, by the way, the Toledo Blade, what a fucking cool name for a newspaper or a magazine. Old publications had the best names. I believe there was like one called the Louisiana Battle Axe or something like that. They're just cool. The Toledo Blade reports that in 1957, 200 people gathered to watch an octopus wrestling event in Puget Sound near Tacoma, Washington. A team from Portland, they had teams in this sport. Wow. Well, what did you do on the weekend? Oh, me and my team went octopus wrestling. We won, by the way, because we caught an 80-pound octopus. The team from Portland in Oregon, they won the contest by catching an 80-pound octopus. Octopus wrestling reached the height of its popularity on the West Coast. Yeah, it does feel like a West Coast thing, doesn't it? On the West Coast of the United States during the 1960s. Yeah, I imagine Californians maybe just all blazed out of their fucking mind during the 60s, going down to the beach and yanking an octopus out of a rock pool. It's such a funny visual, sorry. I hope that you're getting the same visual image in your brain as I am right now. I'm just imagining this like this buff dude in a Speedo and his budgie smugglers walking, jumping into a knee-high rock pool and pulling a poor octopus out. The octopus's family... The octopus's family is like, wait, no, come back. Sorry. I don't think I've laughed this hard on one of these episodes for a very long time. Gary, why didn't you take the garbage out? Well, I was going to, Sharon, but some blonde-haired beach bimbo yanked me out of the hole. Oh, fucking wild. At that time, oh, God damn it. Get this. Okay. So octopus wrestling reached the height of its popularity on the west coast of the United States during the 1960s. At that time, the annual World Octopus Wrestling Championships this can't be real. This is so fucking weird. The annual World Octopus Wrestling Championships were held in Puget Sound, Washington. Yeah, what a great world championship event. Where is it? Is it in New York or is it in like Chicago or Los Angeles? No, it's in Puget Sound, Washington. Oh, God. The event was televised and attracted up to 5,000 spectators. What the fuck? That's crazy. Wow. Trophies were awarded to the individual divers and teams who caught the largest animals. Oh, God damn it. This next... Afterwards, the octopuses were either eaten Jesus, given to the local aquarium or returned to the sea. Jesus. Sharon, it could have been worse. I'm sorry I didn't take the bins out, but I could have been eaten. I could have been a family of four's Thanksgiving dinner. Now I'm just imagining a Thanksgiving dinner where it's just like a big fucking octopus in the middle of the table. Anyway, octopus is delicious, by the way, if you haven't tried it. In April 1963, 111 divers took part in the World Octopus Wrestling Championships. A total of 25 giant Pacific octopuses were captured that day, ranging in weight from 4 to 57 pounds, which in a normal person is 1.8 to 25.9 kilograms. That's heavy. Due to a deal, what the fucking hell? Oh my God. Due to a deal to televise the championships, and as not sufficient octopuses could be found at the beach, the organizers placed several octopuses, which this is the best thing ever. So the beach didn't have enough octopuses, so they placed octopuses there, like stocking a pond full of cod. They couldn't. Oh, that's so funny. They placed several octopuses which they had caught in advance of the contest along the beach to promise action and to ensure a successful contest. Yeah, I guess that ensures it. God damn, this is so fucking funny. H. Allen Smith wrote an article for True Magazine in 1964, collected in Low Man Rides Again, 1973, about a man named O'Rourke, whom he dubs the father of octopus wrestling. Jesus Christ, imagine if that was your dad. According to information Smith collected from Edward Jones and other sources, O'Rourke and a partner developed a business in the late 1940s of fishing for octopuses, with O'Rourke serving as live bait and his partner hauling him out of the water after an octopus was sufficiently wrapped around him. Oh, God, imagine going into a board meeting or a pitch meeting and this guy's like, I have a plan. We have a business opportunity for you to invest in. Okay, sounds great, Mr. O'Rourke. Tell us, what are you thinking? Are you investing in the stock market? Do you have a new invention? No, I have a way to fish for octopuses. Okay, cool. Feel like we had that already, but what's your plan, Mr. O'Rourke? Right, well, what happens is I just jump into the ocean until an octopus sufficiently wraps around me, and then my fucking buddy, Cleet, he yanks me out of the water, and we dine an octopus for weeks. Jesus. Now, apparently, O'Rourke was becoming perhaps the world's greatest authority on the thought processes and the personality of the octopus. He knew how to outmaneuver them, outflank them, and to outthink them. He knew full well many years ago what today's octopus wrestlers are beginning to learn, that it is impossible for a man with two arms to apply a full Nelson on an octopus. This was published, guys. Someone wrote this and was paid for it. It is impossible for a man with two arms to apply a full Nelson on an octopus. He knew full well the futility. Oh, come on. This can't be real. He knew full well the futility of trying for a crotch hold on an opponent with 8 crotches. I don't know if octopuses technically have 8 crotches. I don't know how that works. I guess maybe. And a 1965 issue of Time magazine documented the growing popularity of octopus wrestling as follows. Merely to minnow in about water is no longer enough, as such sports as octopus wrestling are coming increasingly into vogue, particularly in the Pacific Northwest, where the critters grow up to 90 pounds and can be exceedingly tough customers. Although there are several accepted techniques for octopus wrestling, the really sporty way requires that the human diver go without artificial breathing apparatus. That's right, if you go octopus wrestling with a scuba tank, you're a fucking pussy. Wild. That's all the information I can find about octopus wrestling. Oh, God. I'm having a great time. Okay. So, Come on, okay. Sorry, okay. Pull it together, Chapman. Come on, it's all right. Let's talk a little bit more about a different type of cephalopod. We're talking about the giant or the colossal squid. Now, in my mind, this was where the real danger would come from. So, when we think about colossal squid or giant squid, the most common question that arises about giant squids is whether or not these huge animals actually do attack humans or possess a threat to ships. Now, we must answer this question in the affirmative. Yes, they do pose a threat. However, certainly not in the case of modern cruise ships. There's no doubt, however, that a smaller ship or boat, particularly a wooden boat used in olden times, can be occasionally attacked by such a giant animal. The fact that there are few examples of this is obviously due to the fact that the giants do not come close to the surface. That's right, giant squids. Well, I can't remember the zone of the ocean they live in, but they live deep down, so it's very rare for them to come up. Now, this is also good fortune for humans because if it were not, it would certainly have posed a danger to boaters. I would also posit a little what if for you, that if giant squids and colossal squids lived in the upper levels of the ocean, like that was their habitat, I would posit that human history would be very different. I think that nautical travel and exploration would have been far more dangerous if you had these goddamn fucking krakens that at any point could just reach up and pull your whole fucking family under the water and kill you. Either that or we would have hunted them to extinction because we need to go to America. We need spices. We need land. We need slaves. That is me speaking as a European colonizer. Reliable witnesses report that the giant squid has attacked ships in recent times, even large ships. The Archit Udithis, that's a shit name, purportedly swam around a ship. Oh, that's just a name for a giant squid. Okay, the giant squid reportedly swam around the ship, traveling at speeds of up to 40 kilometers per hour. And by the way, this is a fucking phenomenal speed for an aquatic animal. We have no idea how fast a giant squid can get. And it launched its attack. We can assume that the hull of the ship could have been viewed as the body of the Patagonian toothfish, as the places they try to bite into were where the brains were located. How true this is assumption is, will be revealed one day. So we shouldn't always think of a giant squid stories as tales, but we also have to take into account that they are mostly thoroughly colored. Dr. Wolfgang Krom wrote that in 1977. I kind of embellished a little bit. Basically what he's saying is that the idea that giant squids attacking ships, it's not fantasy. It's not entirely fantasy, but it's also not as dramatic as we might say. So the French ship Ville de Paris, Ville de Paris. Yeah, nailed it. This ship participated in the American War for Independence. She sailed in the company of 9 other ships when she was attacked by a huge giant squid, or multiple giant squids, and dragged down into the deep. However, other sources claim the ship sank in a storm in 1782. Both of those are very different stories. It would be nice if we could have had some confirmation on that. Another story regarding a giant squid or colossal squid. Based on other sources, a Hungarian traveller, Dr. Endrek Jekeli, tells several of the above stories. On the 26th of October, 1873, 3 men were fishing in the Belle Isle in Newfoundland and Labrador. They were attacked by a huge giant squid, but one of the fishermen cut off one of the squid's arms. Based on this arm, the length of the animal was subsequently estimated to be at 14 meters long. For the Americans, that is 46 feet on the shore. Another story. Sailors cleaning a ship near St. Leona Island and Cape Nigra? That's a scary word to say. Nigra. Nigra, I'm going to say that, were attacked by a giant squid. 2 were pulled into the deep and a 3rd later died from injuries sustained during the attack. One of the squid's arms severed in the attack was 7.5 meters in length. The full arm was estimated to be about 10 meters long. Based on this, the entire animal would have been much larger. And then in 1873, a fishing boat in Conception Bay, Newfoundland, was attacked by a giant squid. Numerous letters about the incident stated a severed tentacle was recovered. I also, for our Canadian listeners, I just want you to appreciate how I pronounce Newfoundland. It's not Newfoundland. I've seen Come From Away. the fantastic Broadway musical. Have you seen Come From Away, guys? My goodness, it came to Newcastle recently. It was fucking spectacular. I loved it. Sorry, I got a little carried away there. In 1874, a report appeared in an Indian newspaper stating that on the 10th of May of the current year, a ship called the Strathuen was leaving Colombo for Madras through the Bay of Bengal. In the distance, a small sailboat appeared, to which a huge crowd swam with a whipping movement and then climbed onto it. It was a giant squid or giant octopus. The small ship soon capsized and then sank. The crew of the small boat got into the water, but they were picked up by the crew of the Strathuen. Its captain, James Floyd, reported that the small ship called the Pearl, weighing 140 tons, they claimed that they themselves shot the squid floating in silence, which made him furious and climbing onto the ship. 2 sailors died in the squid attack, and a third disappeared, perhaps drowned. 5 people escaped the Pearl. The squid body was said to be at least as thick as the small ship and its arms thick as wood. In the 1930s, Norwegian tanker Brunswick reported having been attacked by a giant squid in the South Pacific between Hawaii and Samoa. The animal tried unsuccessfully to grip the ship with its tentacles before being killed by the propellers. Ooh, that's some juicy calamari. This story was actually validated by Commander Arne Groidsing. Fuck you, Norway. Just say commander of the Royal Norwegian Navy, stating that the ship had not one, but 3 encounters with giant squids between 1930 and 1933. Another story, a giant squid allegedly attacked a raft with survivors from the Britannia in 1941, which had sunk in the South Atlantic. One of the men was dragged away by the squid, and another, Lieutenant Raymond Edmund Griminary Cox, managed to narrowly escape the same fate, though suffering tentacle sucker wounds. I think that's a lie. I think he just got a hickey from a woman at port, and that was his excuse. Sorry, love, that's not what you think. I'm not cheating on you with a sex worker at the dock. It was a giant squid sucker. That's probably a good one to try, I think. Guys, if you're going to get caught, just do it. Why am I giving you advice? Fuck you, you're bad people. Anyway, the chronicle of the survivors was first told in 1941 by the London Illustrated News, which stated that according to the account given by Cox, a survivor first had his legs bitten off by a shark and then was devoured by a giant manta ray. I don't think that's true. I don't think manta rays eat people. But in 1956, Cox himself contacted writer Frank W. Lane to tell his story. They required marine naturalist John Cloudsley Thompson to examine Cox's scars at Birkbeck College, and the former further validated the story, assuring that the marks between 1 and 1/4 inches in size belonged to a 23-foot long squid. The story has been called the only substantiated report of a giant squid killing humans. However, other authors have called it into question, considering it an urban legend. To me, that's enough evidence to say that that did happen. Anyway, another story. In 1978, we're getting very recent now. In 1978, the USS Stein was apparently attacked by a giant squid. The ship's no-foul rubber coating was damaged, with multiple cuts containing evidence of claws found in the squid's tentacles. I didn't know that. Apparently, the giant squid tentacles have little, claws in them, which, I thought they were just, suckers, like you would find on, a little sticky toy, like a little thing you want to stick to the wall in the shower. The next story occurred in 1989. A Philippine fisherman rescued 12 survivors clinging to an overturned boat. They alleged that a giant octopus or giant squid turned the boat upside down, but it did not attack them afterwards. Yet the incident has one fatal outcome. A 12-year-old boy was drowned. In 2003, the crew of a yacht competing to win the round-the-world Jules Verne Trophy reported being attacked by a giant squid several hours after departing from Brittany in France. The squid purportedly latched onto the ship and blocked the rudder with its 2 tentacles. Olivier de Courson, captain of the yacht, stopped the boat, causing the squid to lose interest. "We did not have anything to scare off this beast, so I don't know what we would have done if it didn't let go," Kursian said. being fucking French. We have time to talk about one more cephalopod. I'm going to talk about the Humboldt squid. Never heard of the Humboldt squid before I researched this episode, but it's a cool little animal, and I'm a big fan of it. The Humboldt squid is considered to be the largest of the Omastrophid squid family. The Humboldt squid can grow up to 8 feet and 2 inches long, which is 2.5 meters for our normal people, and it can weigh up to 100 pounds, which is 50 kilograms for our normal people. Typically, the adults reach a mantle, which is the body length, of 4 feet 11 inches, 1.5 meters. Humboldt squids are notorious for their aggression, hence their inclusion on the list and in this episode. In Mexico, I love this, in Mexico they are known as Diablo Rojo, Spanish for the Red Devil. Local fishermen tales claim that people who fell into the waters were devoured within minutes by packs of squid. Wildlife filmmaker Scott Castle made the documentary Humboldt, the man-eating squid, for the Dangerous Waters series on the Discovery Channel. I don't have the Discovery Channel, but if I get it, I will watch that. Now, there is some disagreement on the veracity of the Humboldt squid's aggression. Some scientists claim the only reports of aggression towards humans have occurred when reflective diving gear or flashing lights have been present, acting as provocation. My retort to that claim is, yeah, that still counts. It doesn't really matter what the circumstances are unless it's like the animal was attacked first by the human. It doesn't really matter for us like why it was attacked, because you were wearing a shiny, high-vis vest or you had a flashlight. It doesn't matter. It does mean that the animal can act aggressive. And of course, like obviously shining torches on animals can be seen as provocation. It's not intentional provocation. You know what I mean? There's a difference. Roger Uzen, a veteran scuba diver and amateur underwater videographer, swam with a swarm of Humboldt squids for approximately 20 minutes, later saying they seemed more curious than aggressive. While not feeding or being hunted, Humboldt squid exhibit curious and intelligent behavior. Jeremy Wade deals with the Humboldt squid in his documentary River Monsters. We've used the River Monsters as a source before. If you think back to one of our earlier episodes, I believe there was a ferry disaster in the Amazon where a bunch of people died and were eaten by unknown animals. Jeremy Wade did an episode on that, and he was one of our main sources. So yes, he's done an episode on the Humboldt squid. In this episode, a Californian fisherman claims to have been attacked at a fish table one night as he tried to swim from one boat to another. In the same film, a Peruvian fisherman considers this animal to be life-threatening. If one gets between them, they will be dragged down into the deep. In another film by naturalist Steve Blackshaw, the fishermen report, among other things, that a fisherman was caught in the abyss by a squid. Another fisherman was bitten by the squid on his skull, breaking it into pieces. Yikes. Yeah, the veracity of the claims that any of these animals will attack and kill you it's in doubt. It's not like a tiger when we know they fucking kill people, but it's also not like a cryptid where we don't know it exists. It's kind of in this nebulous, weird middle area. But I wouldn't want to swim with them regardless. I just think the risk is too high. Now, of course, there are other cephalopods that can cause injury to people. We talked about one last week. That's why we're not going into great detail today. But the blue-ringed octopus is obviously, if you're an Australian, you know all about the blue-ringed octopus. But if you don't, blue-ringed octopus, it's one of the smallest octopus species. They like to live in rock pools around the coast of Australia. I believe around the coast of almost all of Australia, although I think once you get too south, it gets too cold for them. They live in rock pools, and their biggest danger is that they're beautiful. They have these beautiful, glowing, almost blue rings, kind of like neon, all over their body. And children sometimes see them in the rock pools and pick them up, and they are very venomous. They're one of, if not the most venomous animals in the world. And yeah, they can sting and they can kill a kid. They can kill a kid in minutes. They can kill an adult in maybe 10 or 15 minutes, I think, as well. So I saw one the other day, actually. I was on a hike with my friend. We were going to a place called Shark Hole. I thought he was saying charcoal, like the black mineral rock, but no, shark hole, as in the anus of a shark. No, it was like a big cove where sharks live. And there's like big rock pools. We walked past, we saw some octopuses, and I saw a little blue ring octopus. Their rings don't glow. The reason they glow, the rings, it's kind of like a defense mechanism. It's basically saying to predators, off you fuck. I'm not good for you. I will poison you and sting you and you will not like it. So that's essentially what that's for, basically, yeah. But we saw it, and they cause injury and death a lot. Another animal that I thought for a second would be on this list was jellyfish, but jellyfish, obviously they're not cephalopods. I don't know why in my brain I had them, because they've got long tentacles, I guess. We'll talk about jellyfish another time, because there are so many stories of those, particularly like the, how do you pronounce it, the Uruguay or whatever, and the box jellyfish. They're fucking wild animals. I don't want anything to do with them. Worse than cephalopods, but as we've learned, cephalopods, pretty bad. So we've talked about the common octopus and then giant squids and colossal squids and the Humboldt squid and of course the blue-ringed octopus as well. All animals that if I were to give any advice would be to just say, just back off a little bit. They're a little spooky. That is it for our... The Essex was an American whaling ship from Nantucket, Massachusetts, and it was launched in 1799. On November 20th, 1820, while at sea in the southern Pacific Ocean under the command of Captain George Pollard Jr., the ship was attacked and sunk by a massive sperm whale. About 2,000 nautical miles, or 3,700 kilometers from the coast of South America, the 20-man crew was forced to make for land in 3 whaleboats with whatever food and water they could scavenge from the wreck. After a month at sea, the crew landed on the uninhabited Henderson Island. 3 men elected to stay on the island, from which they were rescued in April of 1821, while the remaining 17 set off again for the coast of South America. The men suffered severe dehydration, starvation, and exposure on the open ocean, and the survivors eventually resorted to cannibalism. By the time they were rescued in February of 1821, 3 months after the sinking of the Essex, only 5 of the 17 men were left alive. First mate Owen Chase and cabin boy Thomas Nickerson later wrote accounts of the ordeal. The tragedy attracted international attention and inspired Herman Melville to write his 1851 novel, Moby Dick. When Essex departed from Nantucket, Massachusetts on her fateful voyage in August of 1819, she was considered to be a lucky vessel, as her previous 6 whaling expeditions had brought in good profits. She was only 20 years old and had been refitted during the summer. At only 37 meters in length and weighing about 239 tons, the Essex was small for a whaling ship. She was equipped with 5 whaleboats, each about 25 feet or 8.5 meters in length. Essex set sail with a crew of 21 men. 12, including the officers and 2 of the 3 boat steerers, were born and raised in Nantucket, while 9 were off-islanders, of whom several were black. The captain, 29-year-old George Pollard Jr., had sailed as second mate of Essex in 1815 to 1816 and as first mate in 1817 through to 1819. The first mate, 21-year-old Owen Chase, had sailed on Essex in 1817 through to 1819. The second mate was 26-year-old Matthew Joy. The 3 boat steerers were Obed Hendricks and Benjamin Lawrence, both 20 years old and from Nantucket, and Englishman Thomas Chappell. At the age of 14, cabin boy Thomas Nickerson was the youngest member of the crew, while at least 5 more were under the age of 20. The ages of most of the black crew members is not known. Essex departed from Nantucket on August 12, 1819, on what was expected to be a roughly 2.5-year voyage to the whaling grounds off the west coast of South Africa. The route towards Cape Horn was an indirect one, dictated by the prevailing winds of the Atlantic Ocean. First, the ship would sail with the westerlies towards Europe and Africa, and then back towards South America with the northeast trade winds. There were scheduled stops at the Azores and the Cape Verde Islands, where the ship would be stocked with provisions more cheaply than in Nantucket. A few days into the voyage, Essex was hit by a sudden squall in the Gulf Stream. She was knocked on her beam ends and nearly sank. Damages included the loss of her top-gallant sail and 2 whaleboats, with an additional whaleboat sustaining minor damage. Pollard's initial thought was to return to Nantucket for repairs, but he accepted the arguments of Chase and Joy, the first and second mates, who wished to continue to the Azores. at the Cape Verde Islands, the crew were able to purchase a whaleboat. Later, as Essex sailed down the east coast of South America 3 months into the voyage, the first sperm whale was killed. So let's take a little moment now to take a break and talk about sperm whales and why these were such prized kills for whaling boats. So, at this time, the sperm whale was a relatively recently discovered animal. Before this, other whales were hunted, including the right whale. And the right whale was literally named the right whale because it was, hey, that's the right whale to hunt. Eventually, the sperm whale was discovered. Now, the reason it wasn't known before this time is because the sperm whale is a deep water whale. They live incredibly deep in the ocean. And they're very well known because they get into lots of scraps with giant squids. In fact, oftentimes you'll find in the stomach of sperm whales the beaks of giant squids, which are the only part of their body that can't be digested. Their bodies are often also covered with lots of scars from fights that they get into with the giant squids. So the scars are like the suckers that are on the tentacles. I did a book report on sperm whales when I was in year 3, and I still remember a lot about it, although I can't remember the exact level of the ocean. I think they live in the twilight zone, but I can't remember. My best friend Mason also had to do a book report on an ocean animal, and it was the giant squid. And I still remember this. This really annoys me. Me and him worked together on this, and part of the thing was on the back wall of the classroom, they did like this big mural, and we had to we had to draw and paint our animals to scale and place them in the ocean where they were supposed to go. And we discovered that sperm whales and giant squids often fought and clashed, and we thought that was the coolest thing ever. So when we were laying down our artworks to be put up on the wall, we arranged ours so that my sperm whale had the tentacles of the giant squid around it, and it looked really cool, and we placed that down. And I knew that the teacher would be like, ugh, what are they doing? And I went up to the teacher and said, hey, this isn't an accident, okay? We did this because they fight each other, and we think it would be really cool to go up on the wall like that. And so then the next day we came in, guess what? They were fucking miles apart. That teacher was a bitch and I hate her. But anyway, that's why I am so interested in sperm whales. The other thing about the sperm whale and why they were so prized is the name, sperm whale. Now, when you're a kid, you go, hee 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 hee, sperm. Why are they named sperm whales? And the teacher will give you some answer that's wrong. You're sitting there thinking, surely they're not named after cum. My friends, sperm whales are indeed named after cum. So, if you crack open a sperm whale's brain, skull, if you crack open their skull, which I do not recommend you do, you will find this very weird jelly-like substance around their brain called spermaceti, and that's where the name comes from. And yeah, it looks like semen. That's literally why it's called that. It's called spermaceti because it looks like sperms. This stuff was great for being a lubricant. Not in that way, you sick freaks. In the Industrial Revolution, which was currently happening, they needed lots of lubricant for the machines, and this spermaceti was fantastic. They also discovered that the fat from the whale was great for candles because for some reason it burned cleaner, it burned slower, it burned brighter, and it also didn't leave like a gross like waxy residue over the rest of the room. Or it did, but not as much as like other fats from other animals did. So the sperm whale was highly sought after. The other reason as well is that they're massive, they're huge. Sperm whales are the largest of the toothed animals in the world, which makes it the largest predator on Earth. And I believe it would make it the largest predator that has ever existed on Earth. We know that the blue whale is the biggest whale. Sperm whales are like a couple rungs down. I think there's like 2 or 3 whales between sperm whales and blue whales, but they are incredibly huge. And obviously that means there's a lot of meat on them, there's a lot of fat on them, there's a lot of blubber on them, and there's a lot of spermaceti as well. So incredibly sought after whales, and they basically, once they were discovered, it revolutionized the whaling game. The ships were changed. Essentially what they used to do is they would just harpoon a whale and drag it back into shore. These whales were so big that they couldn't do that. It would take too long to drag them back to the shore, so they would retrofit all the ships so that essentially you would drag the whale onto the ship, and the ship became like a giant meat factory. You would be processing and butchering the whale on the ship, storing all the fat and the blubber and the meat and the spermaceti into barrels, and then chucking the carcass off. And the ships would just go around for up to like a few years at a time, hunting as many whales as they could, filling up their cargo holds with these barrels full of meat and blubber and fat. And that's basically what the whaling game became. It was huge. So that's what the Essex was doing. They were hunting sperm whales. And that would also be their fate as well. A sperm whale would also be the end of the Essex. So, in the face of strong winds from the west, the Essex took over a month to round Cape Horn into the whaling grounds of the South Pacific. In January 1820, she met up with other whalers from Nantucket at St. Mary's Island off the coast of West Chile. After several months of searching for whales off the coast of Chile, Essex sailed north and met more success off the coast of Peru. Within 2 months, they had killed enough whales to produce 450 barrels of oil. In May of 1820, Essex hailed the Aurora, another whaler from Nantucket, whose captain told them that another whaling ground known as the Offshore Ground had been discovered more than 1,000 miles off the Peruvian coast. Pollard decided that after making provisional stops, he would set sail for these new grounds rather than stay in the depleted coastal grounds that they were currently in. In September of 1820, the Essex sailed to the Peruvian port town of Atacames, which is now part of Ecuador. It was here that Henry DeWitt jumped ship, leaving the Essex with only a crew of 20. When whales were spotted, the 3 whaleboats, each with an officer, a boat steerer, and 4 crew members, would go in pursuit. Without DeWitt, however, there would only be 2 crew members left aboard the Essex, which was not enough to safely handle a ship of the Essex's size and type. To restock their food supplies for the long journey, Essex sailed to Charles Island, which was later renamed as Florina Island in the Galapagos Islands. The crew needed to fix a serious leak and initially anchored off Hood Island, which is now known as Espanola Island, on October 8th, 1820. During a week at anchor, they captured 300 Galapagos giant tortoises to supplement the ship's food stores. They erroneously believed that, and I don't know why they thought this, they thought that tortoises were immortal and they didn't need to, well, not immortal, they thought that tortoises didn't need to eat or drink water to survive. So they just thought that if we just keep these animals on the ship, that's our food supply taken care of for like seemingly forever. These tortoises weigh between 100 and 800 pounds, and they were captured alive, and some of them were actually allowed to roam the ship at will, while the rest of them were kept in the hold. It was pretty cool. I mean, I think that'd be pretty fun to just be on a big whaling ship and you have this just fucking Galapagos tortoises walking around. I'd make it a pet and be really sad when they had to eat them. And they would also drink their blood, which is not necessarily good for you. So, after picking up all the tortoises, and while hunting on Charles Island, Chappell lit a fire as a prank, just as a funny little goof. But unknown to him, it was the height of the dry season, and the fire quickly burned out of control, surrounding the hunters and forcing them to run through the flames to escape. By the time the men returned to the Essex, most of the entire island was burning, and Pollard swore vengeance on whoever had set it. I don't think that Chappell ever admitted to it. The next day, the island was still burning as the ship sailed for offshore grounds. Even after a full day of sailing, the fire was still visible on the horizon. Chappell would only admit that he had set the fire much later after the Essex sank. Many years later, Nickerson returned to Charles Island and found a blackened wasteland. He observed that neither trees, shrubbery, nor grass have appeared since. So not a great prank from Chappell there. When the Essex reached the hunting grounds about 1,000 miles west of the Galapagos Islands, whales still proved elusive. When they finally found a whale on November 16, 1820, it surfaced directly beneath Chase's boat. No one was injured, but to Chase's dismay, the boat required repairs. At 8 o'clock in the morning on November 20th, 1820, the lookout sighted spouts of water, and the 3 remaining whaleboats set out to pursue a pod of sperm whales. On the leeward side of the Essex, Chase's whaleboat harpooned a whale, but its tail struck the boat and opened up a seam, forcing the crew to cut the harpoon line and return to the Essex for repairs. 2 miles away off the windward side, Pollard and Joy's boat each harpooned a whale and were dragged towards the horizon away from the Essex. Chase was repairing the damaged whaleboat on board the Essex when the crew sighted an unusually large sperm whale, reportedly around 85 feet or 26 meters in length, and it was reportedly acting quite strangely. It lay motionless on the surface, facing the ship, and then began to swim towards the vessel, picking up speed by the shallow diving. The whale rammed the Essex, rocking her from side to side, and then it dove underneath her, surfacing close on the ship's starboard side. As its head lay along the bow and the tail by the stern, it was motionless and appeared to be stunned. Chase prepared to harpoon it from the deck when he realized that its tail was only inches from the rudder, which the whale could easily destroy if provoked by an attempt to kill it. Fearing to leave the ship stuck thousands of miles from land with no rudder to steer it, Chase hesitated. The whale recovered, swam hundreds of yards forwards of the ship, and then turned to face the ship's bow. I turned around and saw him about 150 rods directly ahead of us, coming down twice its ordinary speed of around 24 knots, and it appeared with tenfold fury and vengeance in its aspect. The surf flew in all directions around him, with a continual violent thrashing of its head. His head about half out of the water, and in that way he came upon us, and again struck the ship. That was the way that Owen Chase described the attack. The whale crushed the bow, driving the vessel backwards, and then finally disengaged its head from the shattered timbers and swam off, leaving the Essex quickly going down by the bow. Chase and the remaining sailors retrieved the spare whaleboat, while on the steward, William Bond ran below to gather the captain's chest and whatever navigational aids he could find. The whaleboats of Pollard and Joy were about 2 miles from the Essex when one of the boat steerers looked back and saw the ship falling on her beam ends. The 2 boats hurriedly released their whales and rowed back to the Essex. Yar, the captain's boat was the first that reached us. He stopped about a boat's length off, but had no power to utter a single syllable. He was so completely overpowered with the spectacle before him. He was in short time, however, enabled to address the inquiry to me. My God, Mr. Chase, what is the matter? I answered, we have been stove by a whale. Yar. I don't think they said yar back then, like they're not pirates, but I think it's funner to do that, so I'm going to keep saying yar. Now, the cause of this whale's aggression is not actually known. In The Heart of the Sea, author Nathaniel Philbrick speculated that it may have first struck the boat accidentally, or have had its curiosity aroused by the sound of a hammer as the damaged whaleboat was being repaired. The frequency and sound of the nailing may have sounded similar to those made by bull sperm whales to communicate and echolocate. The crew spent the next 2 days salvaging what supplies remained from the waterlogged wreck of the Essex. 3 whaleboats were rigged with makeshift masts and sails were taken from the Essex, and boards were added to heighten the gunwales and prevent large waves from spilling over the sides. Inside Pollard's sea chest, which Bond's quick thinking had managed to save, were 2 sets of navigational equipment and 2 copies of maritime charts. These were split between Pollard's and Chase's boats. Joy's boat was left without any means of navigation except to keep within sight of the other boats. Essex sank approximately 2,000 nautical miles west of South America. The officers debated which route to take towards land. Pollard favoured sailing west with the prevailing winds and current. The nearest islands to the west were the Marquesas Islands, which were about 1,200 miles away, but Pollard was afraid they would encounter cannibals there, and concluded that it would be safer to sail to the Society Islands about 2,000 miles away. Chase and Joy disagreed, fearing that the Society Islands might be cannibals, and suggested sailing south for about 1,500 miles, and then picking up a band of variable winds to take them off the coast of Chile or Peru, all the time hoping to come across another whale ship. In fact, both the Marquesas and Society Islands would have been safe destinations, as the inhabitants at that time were friendly towards mariners, but Pollard accepted the suggestions of Chase and Joy. Herman Melville later speculated that the crew would all have survived if they had followed Pollard's recommendation and sailed towards the Society Islands, writing, "All the suffering these miserable men of the Essex might, in all human probability, have been avoided if they had immediately after the wreck steered straight for Tahiti, from which they were not very distant at the time, but they dreaded cannibals." Yeah, I'll be honest, growing up as a child, I thought cannibals were going to be more of an issue in real life. Turns out, not a lot of people are cannibals. Turns out, it's not good for you, and most people don't do it. The crew were divided between the 3 boats, under the command of Pollard, Chase, and Joy, and on November 22nd, 1820, they set off for land. Never designed for long voyages, all of the whaleboats had been very roughly repaired, and leaks were a constant and serious problem during the voyage. After losing a timber, the crew of one boat had to lean to one side to raise the other side out of the water until another boat was able to draw close, allowing a sailor to nail a piece of wood over the hole. Storms and rough seas were frequently plaguing the tiny whaleboats, and the men who were not occupied with steering and trimming the sails spent most of their time bailing water from the bilge. Food and water were rationed from the beginning, with the men first consuming the bread that had been soaked in seawater, even though it increased their thirst. After 10 days of eating only meager rations of bread, they slaughtered the first of the giant tortoises that had been salvaged from the wreck and achieved quite a small respite from hunger. On December 20th, exactly 1 month after the whale attack, with the men suffering from severe starvation, dehydration, and exposure, the boats landed on the uninhabited Henderson Island, a small, uplifted coral atoll within the modern-day British territory of the Pitcairn Islands. The men incorrectly believed that they had landed on the Duchy Islands, a similar atoll about 220 miles to the east. Had they landed on Pitcairn itself, around 120 miles to the southwest, they might have received help. The descendants of the HMAS Bounty, which had famously mutineered in 1789, still lived there. On Henderson Island, the Essex's crew found food in the form of birds, crabs, fish, eggs, and peppergrass, but water proved more difficult to find, although they eventually came across a freshwater spring below the tide line. In fact, in terms of the birds, they found a species of bird there similar to kind of like dodos, and these birds had never seen humans before, so they didn't have a fear of humans, and within like 6 days, the crew had hunted these birds to extinction, and there were no more left on the island. So just after 1 week, they had largely exhausted the island's food resources. On December 26th, they concluded that they would all starve to death if they remained much longer. As most of the crew prepared to set sail in the whaleboats once again, 3 men, William Wright, Seth Weeks, and Thomas Chappell, the only white member of the crew who were not natives to the Nantucket, opted to stay behind on the island. Pollard promised, if he made it back to South America, to see that they were rescued. Pollard was true to his word, and the 3 men on Henderson Island were rescued by Surrey, an Australian trading vessel, in April 1821. Australia was mentioned, woohoo! The remaining Essex crewmen, now numbering 17 in 3 whaleboats, resumed their journey on December 27th, 2 days after Christmas, with the intention of reaching Easter Island. On January 4th, 1821, they estimated that they had drifted too far south of Easter Island and decided to make for Mas Afura Island off the coast of Chile. On the same day, they exhausted their supply of fish and birds from Henderson Island and were back to daily rations of a cup of water and 3 ounces of bread. On January 10th, Joy, who had been in poor health even before Essex left Nantucket, he died, and his body was consigned to the sea. Pollard's boat steerer, Obed Hendricks, took over command of Joy's boat. The following day, Chase's boat became separated from the others during a squall. On January 20th, Richard Peterson died on Chase's boat, and his body too was buried at sea. On the same day, more than 100 miles to the north, Lawson Thomas died on Hendricks's boat. By this time, the provisions on Pollard's and Hendricks's boat had already run out, and they had made the grim decision to eat his body. 2 days later, Charles Shorter died and was eaten. Within a few days, Isaiah Shepherd and Samuel Reed suffered a similar fate. On the night of January 29th, the boats of Pollard and Hendricks became separated. Hendrix's boat lacked any navigational equipment, and he and his 2 remaining crew members, William Bond and Joseph West, were never seen again. Months later, a whaleboat with 4 skeletons in it was found washed up on Duchy Island, and it was suggested that this boat was Hendrix's. By February 6th, the crew of Pollard's boat was again starving. It was decided to draw lots, and Owen Coffin was shot and eaten. 5 days later, Barzilia Ray died and was eaten by Pollard and Charles Ramsdell. Meanwhile, the men in Chase's boat had resorted to cannibalism when Isaac Cole died on February 10th. "I have no language, yar, to paint the anguish, yar, of our souls in this dreadful, yar, dilemma, yar," Chase later recounted in his memoirs, Sans Yars. On the morning of February 18th, Lawrence, who was steering Chase's boat, spotted a sail a few miles distant. They managed to catch up to the vessel, which turned out to be the British ship the Indian. Too weak to climb aboard, Chase, Lawrence, and Nickerson had to be lifted from their boat and carried to the captain's cabin. Later that day, they came within sight of Marsafura, the islands towards Chase had, with remarkable accuracy, been navigating. A few days later, the Indian sailed into the port Valparaiso. The whaleboat, which was being towed behind the Indian, was lost in a gale. On February 23rd, 93 days after the sinking of the Essex, Pollard and Ramsdell were spotted by the Nantucket whale ship Dolphin near St. Mary's Island off the coast of Chile, where Essex had stopped over a year before. Pollard and Ramsdell were close to starvation, sucking on the bones of their dead shipmates and drifting in and out of consciousness when they were taken aboard the Dolphin. They were then transferred to another Nantucket whale ship called the Two Brothers, which was sailing for Valparaiso. On March 17th, they reached the port and were reunited with Chase, Lawrence, and Nickerson, who had been recovering on the frigate USS Constellation under the care of the ship's surgeon. All whaleboat survivors were Nantucketeers. On March 23rd, Chase, Lawrence, Nickerson, and Ramsdell set off for Nantucket in the whale ship the Eagle. Pollard was still too weak to make the journey and followed them aboard the Two Brothers in May. The commander of Constellation arranged the rescue of the 3 seamen who had stayed on what they thought was Duchy Island, but was actually Henderson Island. He asked the captain of an Australian trading vessel, the Surrey, which was returning to Australia, to stop at Duchy and pick up the survivors. When they found Duchy Island uninhabited, the captain of the Surrey wondered if the officers of the Essex had confused Duchy and Henderson Island and decided to sail onto the Henderson Islands, where they found Chappell, Weeks, and Wright on the 9th of April. It's likely if the Australian captain hadn't made the decision to double-check Henderson Island, that those 3 would not have survived much longer. Pollard returned to the sea in early 1822 to captain the Two Brothers. She was wrecked on the French frigate Shoals to the northwest of the Sandwich Islands during Pollard's first voyage as her captain. This guy is bad luck. The crew, which included Nickerson and Ramsdell, took 2 whaleboats which were picked up the following day by the whale ship the Martha, who had been sailing with them. This wreck was to end Pollard's whaling career, and he was considered a doomed captain, or a Jonah, whom no whale ship owner would ever again trust with a vessel. After one voyage aboard a merchant vessel, he retired from the sea and became a night watchman in Nantucket. Every year, on November 20th, the anniversary of the sinking of the Essex, he would lock himself in his room and observe a fast. He died in Nantucket on January 7th, 1870, at the age of 78. Chase returned to Nantucket on June 11th, 1821, to find that he had a 14-month-old daughter who he had never met. 4 months later, he had completed an account of the disaster called The Narrative of the Most Extraordinary and Distressing Shipwreck of the Whale Ship Essex. Could have used a workshop on the title there. It's a bit wordy. Herman Melville used this book as one of the inspirations for his 1851 novel Moby Dick. Chase then sailed as first mate on the whale ship Florida, or Florida, I guess. I don't know why I pronounced it Florida, and returned to Nantucket in 1823. His wife died after the birth of their 3rd child, and he married the widow of former Essex mate Matthew Joy. He then captained the New Bedford whale ship Winslow and the Nantucket whale ship Charles Carroll, in which he owned a share. Chase again married after the death of his 2nd wife. This guy's very unlucky as well, only to divorce his 3rd wife when he found out she had given birth 16 months after he had last seen her. Although He subsequently brought up the child as his own. Okay, this guy's kind of chill like that. I like that. In September of 1840, 2 months after the divorce was finalised, he married for the fourth and final time and retired from whaling. Chase died in Nantucket on March 7th, 1869 at the age of 73. Lawrence captained the whale ships Dromo and Huron before retiring and buying a small farm at Siskonet in Nantucket. He died in Nantucket on March 28th, 1879 at the age of 80. Ramsdell captained the whale ship General Jackson. He died in Nantucket on July 8th, 1866 at the age of 62. Nickerson became a captain in the merchant services and moved to Brooklyn in New York. Later in his life, he returned to Nantucket where he ran a boarding house for summer visitors and wrote an account of the sinking, titled The Loss of the Ship Essex Sunk by a Whale and the Ordeal of the Crew in Open Boats. Again, could use a shorter title. Something like The Ordeal of the Whale, or something like that, I don't know. Nickerson wrote this account 56 years after the sinking, and in 1876... and it was lost in He wrote this account 56 years after the sinking in 1876, and it was lost until 1960. The Nantucket Historical Association published it in 1984. He died in February of 1883, aged 77. 3 men, Chappell, Weeks and Wright, who had been rescued from Henderson Island, continued to work as crew members of their rescue ship, the Surrey, before making their way back to England and then the United States. Chappell retired from sailing and became a missionary, but he died of a plague fever in Timor. Wright was lost at sea in a hurricane in the West Indies. Weeks retired to Cape Cod, where he died on September 12, 1887, having outlived the rest of the Essex survivors. Now, I have been extremely broad in the storytelling here. There is so much to go into in terms of the ordeal that the men went through on the boats and on the island. It is a massive story. It's one of the worst maritime disasters in history. And you know that it had to be good because Moby Dick is based on it. It is not normal for a sperm whale to be that aggressive, and it's unknown exactly why it was aggressive. Like, there are some theories. One of the theories that isn't really mentioned in that story is that hey, they were killing all the other whales around it, and maybe that annoyed that big whale. I don't know. It also could have been confused by the banging of the hammer and nail on the boat as they were trying to repair it, because apparently the same frequency and sound kind of sounds like whales wanting to fuck. So I think that maybe it was just like a horny big whale that caused a lot of damage. Wow. What a fantastic collection of episodes. Just listening back to that, it really made me nostalgic. That's one word I'll put for it. Nostalgic and also a little embarrassed on how bad the show used to be. Not bad, but different. Definitely feel like we've hit our stride now, 126 episodes in. That is going to do it for today, my beautiful friends. As said at the outset, I'm now married. We're having our first fight currently. I'm going to predict it's something that I said or did. She's pretty much perfect in every way, so it couldn't have been her. But I will find a way to make it her, because that is that's the skill of a real husband, is to be able to make my problems and make my faults the fault of my wife. That's the first time I think I've referred to her as my wife publicly. You're welcome. You got to experience that. Oh, wow. I also hope that, because this will be scheduled from a week out, I hope people don't think I'm actually recording. Like, people who don't listen to the show, they just see the episodes go out. I hope they don't think that I'm, like, recording episodes of a podcast on my wedding day. That it's a bad look. You take a day off, Chapman. Jesus. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for your love and support. Head over to the Patreon to help support the show. We've got a lot of free members over there and a few other extra special folks who are helping me keep my life afloat. So you can head over there. I really would appreciate it. And yeah, thank you so much. As always, stay safe, because as we've learned, it's a jungle out there. Although today, I guess it's more like it's an ocean out there. It doesn't sound as good. Just keep swimming, folks. Just like Dory said, just keep swimming. My name's Ellen DeGeneres. I'm a piece of shit. That's my favorite quote from Finding Dory. Okay, farewell.